Chapter 363. The old monk's words of "from where I came from" with a smile was like throwing a huge rock into a calm lake, causing the expressions of the monks of the cold mountain temple to change at the same time. Recently, all the eminent monks from all over the world had gathered in the cold mountain temple. The procedure to enter the temple was nothing more than to report the name of one's sect, the name of one's Buddhist name, and which temple one was practicing in. Those who were eminent monks would naturally be received by monks of a higher standard. Even a nameless monk would be properly accommodated. However, Master Zhou Xian's first words clearly told the monks of the cold mountain temple that he was here to make trouble. Taking without asking was tantamount to stealing. Coming to discuss Zen without any prior notice was clearly an act of destroying the place and challenging the dojo. The young monk of the cold mountain temple lacked experience after all. Faced with such a situation, he didn't know how to respond for a moment. What does "from where I came" mean? Princess Xianxia's pretty face was filled with puzzlement. She felt that the monk's words were really profound and difficult to understand. I don't know. Li Yi shook his head. In order to prevent the old monk Tan Yin from undermining him again, he decided not to say anything else. Furthermore, when it came to Buddhist principles, everyone's comprehension was different. Perhaps that old monk called Zhou Xian just felt that no one could understand what he was saying, and it was very useful for showing off. Li Yi had guessed wrong this time. Master Tan Yin did not have the time to tear down the stage, because the stage of Cold Mountain Temple was about to be torn down. The old monk Zhou Xian still had a smile on his face as he said, "I've heard that great Master Tan Yin of the Cold Mountain Temple has a profound understanding of the Dharma and is an eminent monk of Buddhism. We've come from afar just to discuss the Dharma with the great master and resolve the doubts in our hearts." Monk Tan Yin took a step forward and said with a smile, "Master, you have come from afar. Our Cold Mountain Temple naturally welcomes you. However, this is not a place to discuss Zen. Please move aside." It was the Water and Land Dharma Assembly, and there were many eminent monks from all over the world in the temple. It was common for them to discuss Zen and Buddhism with each other, but it had never been so direct, simple and crude. Almost all the nobles in the capital had gathered here. If they lost, it would be a great loss to the reputation of the Cold Mountain Temple. Buddha is everywhere. When it comes to Zen, why should there be a distinction between regions? The foreign old monk shook his head and said. As soon as he said that, another uproar broke out among the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple. This was really not giving him any face at all. There were already a lot of people walking around the temple, and with Master Sandalwood Yin's ability to attract fans, many people gathered around in a short period of time. What's going on? Who is Master Tan Yin talking to? Could it be that the other party is also a Buddhist master? I don't know where he came from, but he just said that he wanted to discuss Zen with Master Tan Yin. An eminent monk discussing Zen? I can't miss this opportunity. It was a rare opportunity for an eminent monk to talk about Zen. Everyone was ready to watch the show. Li Yi was also curious about how the Cold Mountain Temple would deal with the old monk who had made a scene. Another middle-aged monk had already walked forward and asked, "How do you want to discuss the Dharma?" Master Sandalwood Yin was the symbol of the Cold Mountain Temple. He could not afford to make any mistakes. If any monk could discuss Zen with him directly, he would probably only be able to do one thing in his life. If you want to discuss Zen, you must first meditate. Master Sandalwood Yin is an eminent monk, so his meditation skills must be extraordinary. If I may be so bold, I would like to compete in meditation with Master Sandalwood Yin. The middle-aged monk who had been silent all this while suddenly said, "What is meditation?" It was Princess Xianxia's habit to ask whenever she did not understand. "It's to see who can stay in a daze longer." Li Yi gave a common explanation. In the journey to the west, Xuanzang from the kingdom of Qi fought with the three demons. One of them was to compete in meditation in the sky. This was a classic plot in the journey to the west. Art came from life, but it was higher than life. He did not expect to see such a scene in reality. Meditation was a monk's basic skill. This middle-aged monk wanted to compete with Master Sandalwood Yin to see who could meditate longer and compete to be the monk who could last the longest in the Jing kingdom. It was really bullying. One was a strong adult man and the other was an old man with half a foot in the coffin. Wasn't it obvious who would last longer than the other? The master has to preside over the Water and Land Dharma Assembly and has no time to deal with miscellaneous matters. If you are here for this, please leave. Since the other party was here to make trouble, the monks of the Cold Mountain Temple did not need to be polite. They did not even have the intention to invite these monks for a cup of tea. I heard that the Cold Mountain Temple of the Jing Kingdom is a holy land of Buddhism, and Master Sandalwood Yin is an eminent monk. We have come from afar. Is this how you treat your guests? A young monk who came with the old monk suddenly said. What, the Cold Mountain Temple of the Jing Kingdom? These monks are not from the Jing Kingdom? Monks from other countries dare to make trouble at the Dharma assembly. Drag them out and beat them to death. If they were monks from the Jing Kingdom, the crowd would not mind watching a wonderful discussion of Zen. After all, this kind of thing was not common. However, since they were not monks from the Jing Kingdom and were here to make trouble, they immediately gave up the idea. This kind of guy with bad intentions should be dragged out and beaten to death. Today the temple was full of high-ranking officials and nobles, and there were many guards with them. Immediately a few people walked toward the monks. The young monk knew that he had said something wrong. Seeing this, his expression changed slightly. The middle-aged monk with the iron rod stood in front of the old monk expressionlessly. He gave off a dangerous aura. Wait. An old monk from the Cold Mountain Temple waved his hand. The Water and Land Dharma Assembly was originally to invite eminent monks from all over the world. Even if they were monks from other countries, if they were beaten to death in the Cold Mountain Temple, the reputation of the Cold Mountain Temple would be tarnished. The old monk looked at the middle-aged monk and said, All living things are empty. There is no enlightenment, no confusion, no holiness, no mortality, no giving, no receiving, no joy, no anger, and no Zen. Winning is also empty and losing is also empty. What else do you want to discuss? What do you mean, Master? Some people were confused. Among the surrounding believers, there were still some who knew Buddhist scriptures. They immediately gave an explanation to what the old monk had just said. Only then did the crowd come to a realization. They looked at the few foreign monks with playful eyes. Didn't you want to discuss Zen? Now the Buddhists say that joy and anger are empty. Even Zen is empty. What else do you have to discuss? What else do you want to discuss? The middle-aged monk was expressionless. Under the crowd's mocking gaze, he suddenly stretched out his hand and gave the old monk a hard slap on the face. Stop. How dare you? Seeing this scene, the surrounding monks of the Cold Mountain Temple could not sit still. They surrounded the middle-aged monk and glared at him. The old monk was also slapped. His face was burning with pain. When he came to his senses, he also looked at him angrily. After a short moment of shock, the crowd's gazes also became unfriendly. Not only did he come to disrupt the Dharma assembly, but a monk from another country actually dared to make a move on the territory of the Jing Kingdom. He did not want to go back today. It's over. This monk has some skills, Li could not help but say. Why? Princess Xianxia looked up at him. Li sighed and explained, Just now, the master said that he was neither happy nor angry. Look at his expression now. Princess Xianxia turned her head in confusion. She immediately saw the old monk's angry face and immediately understood. Even he could not do what he said. Naturally, it did not count. Those who did not understand the reason for the incident heard Li Yi's explanation and came to their senses. The way they looked at the monks changed. Chapter 364. The old monk of the Cold Mountain Temple said a seemingly powerful Buddhist phrase to break the stalemate, but unexpectedly he was defeated by the middle-aged monk's slap. Not only was he slapped by the middle-aged monk, but he was also slapped by himself. Just a moment ago he was saying, neither joy nor anger, and the next moment he was glaring at the monk. Contradicting himself, the old monk with profound Buddhist teachings was defeated. Even the old monk was no match for the monk, let alone the young monk. He even forcibly held back the anger on his face. These monks are not simple. They must have come for the Water and Land Dharma assembly. Let's see how the Cold Mountain Temple will deal with it. Why hasn't Master Sandine made a move yet? The monks of the Jing Kingdom were slapped in the face by the foreign monks. As the people of the Jing Kingdom, they naturally did not look good. This was no longer about the face of the Cold Mountain Temple. It was enough to rise to the height of national honor. Obviously, as the dignitaries of the capital, these people present were the ones with the strongest national pride. At this moment, no one said anything about dragging these monks out and beating them to death. The Water and Land Dharma assembly held by the Cold Mountain Temple was not only aimed at the monks of the Jing Kingdom, but also very welcoming of the friendly foreign monks. If they really dragged them out and beat them to death, wouldn't it mean that their side was afraid? Even if they could shut up one or two people, could they shut up all the people present? If this matter was spread out, the reputation that the Cold Mountain Temple had accumulated over the years would also be destroyed. Therefore, at this moment, what everyone was most looking forward to was that Master Sandian could really defeat these foreign monks with ulterior motives in terms of Buddhist teachings. The old monk had been provoking them for a while, and more people gathered around. Coincidentally, the preaching in a Buddhist hall ended and the crowd came out. Seeing the situation here, they gathered here with puzzled hearts. Li Xian and Emingzhu also came to Li Yi's side, surrounded by more than 10 guards, vigilantly watching everything around them. What's going on? Li Xian glanced at the monks in the middle who were arguing with each other and asked in confusion. Li Yi gestured to the crowd. Let's continue watching. Li Yi did not say anything, but Princess Xianxia excitedly recounted what had just happened. She felt that listening to these monks talk was much more interesting than staying in the palace all day listening to the lectures of those old teachers. Of course, Mr. Mathematician was an exception. The sadhu of the Qi Kingdom, Emingzhu said. What? Li Yi looked back at her. That man is an ascetic monk from the Qi Kingdom. Emingzhu looked at the middle-aged monk with the iron rod in his hand and said slowly, holding an iron rod in his hand and shaving his eyebrows, he is undoubtedly an ascetic monk. Only the Qi Kingdom has such monks. If these monks were monks from the Qi Kingdom, it would make sense that they were here to cause trouble. This was a racial hatred. Buddhism had no borders, but monks did. The monks of the Qi Kingdom and the Jing Kingdom had always been at odds. At this moment, the old monk from the Cold Mountain Temple who had spoken earlier had already retreated in shame. The old monk, Xianxia, smiled and looked at Master Sandanyan and asked, "What is Buddha?" He dares to challenge Master Sandanyan to Buddha. He really overestimates himself. Master Sandanyan has profound dharma. This old monk will definitely lose. What is Buddha? He actually asked such a simple question. I'm afraid any monk can answer it. The crowd was still very confident in Master Sandanyan. After all, the title of a virtuous monk did not come from nowhere. Even His Majesty had personally acknowledged it. How could the Master's dharma be fake? However, unlike what the crowd had imagined, they did not see the scene of Master Sandanyan defeating the foreign monk in a few sentences. After the old monk had asked this question for a long time, Master Sandanyan still did not speak. Why isn't Master Sandanyan speaking? The crowd began to wonder. Is this question difficult to answer? Master can't. Seeing Master Sandanyan's expression, some people looked doubtful. What is Buddha? It was normal for them to not be able to answer this question. Master Sandanyan would not be able to answer it either. He was a virtuous monk. Monk, why make things difficult for other monks? Li Yi sighed. Although he did not understand Dharma, he was experienced and knowledgeable. There were many traps in this kind of question. He could not let the other party take the initiative at all. Otherwise, if he was not careful, the other party would seize the initiative. At this time, Master Sandanyan's approach was the wisest. I can't say it. It's all wrong. Li Yi muttered softly. Li Mingzhu raised her head and looked at him in surprise. This sentence, no matter how she looked at it, didn't seem to come out of his mouth. What can't be said? When the Tsundra Lolita heard this, the expression on her face became even more puzzled. Some of the people around who were familiar with Dharma also heard Li Yi's words and nodded in agreement. Just as the young man had said, Master Sandanyan could not answer this question. As long as he opened his mouth, he would be greeted by the other party's relentless pursuit. Li Yi was standing next to Master Sandanyan. Although his voice was soft, it did not escape the other party's ears. He turned his head slightly to look at Li Yi. This was the second time he had heard this sentence from him, and it was the same as what he was thinking. Why isn't Master Sandanyan speaking? Monk Xianxia smiled. It was wrong to say it, but it was also wrong not to say it. Countless people were thinking, why don't we drag these monks out and beat them to death? Princess Xianxia could not help but tug at Li Yi's sleeve and asked, why isn't Master Sandanyan speaking? Does he not know the answer? What is Buddha? A child's heart was very simple and pure. She did not know what the conversation between the two old monks meant. She was just curious about the answer to the question. Curiosity was something that children of this age did not lack, even if she was a princess. She did not ask Li Xian or Emingzu because in her eyes, the teacher should be omniscient just like his father. Looking at the little girl's inquisitive eyes, Li Yi could not say the word, "I don't know." He patted her head and whispered, "Master Sandanyan is a highly virtuous monk. How could he not know the answer to this question? It's just that the master is an expert. If he were to say the answer directly, wouldn't he be no different from those ordinary people?" Li Yi's voice was very soft and could only be heard in a small area. However, as soon as he opened his mouth, the people around him turned to look at him. After all, the person who could say that just now was not a simple person. Moreover, they also wanted to know why he would say such a thing. Could it be that he really understood Master Sandanyan's meaning? Then how did the teacher know? Princess Xianxia was even more curious. The master did not say it, so how did the teacher know what he was thinking? What did the monk ask Master Sandanyan just now? Li Yi asked with a smile. What is Buddha? Princess Xianxia said immediately. Look, although Master Sandanyan did not speak just now, he looked at me, looked at you, looked at the people around us, but thinking about that question, it is not difficult to understand. He actually wanted to say that you are Buddha, I am Buddha, and all living beings are Buddha. As a teacher of mathematics, Li Yi fulfilled his responsibility as a teacher of Buddhism very well. If Princess Xianxia had such a teacher. There was an eminent monk in the former Tang dynasty who said that without enlightenment, Buddha is all living beings. When one is enlightened, all living beings are Buddha. In fact, it means that everyone has Buddha nature, but it is covered by the mortal world. This is what Master Sandanyan wants to tell us. Master Sandanyan is indeed an eminent monk. He can actually demonstrate Buddhist etiquette invisibly. I admire him. So that's how it is. The little girl nodded as if she understood. She could not say it, indeed could not say it. After the teacher said it, she was actually even more confused. So that's how it is. A man in embroidered clothes behind Li Yi was suddenly enlightened. Another person's face was full of joy. No wonder Master Sandanyan looked at me just now. All living beings are Buddha. So, I also have Buddha nature? Ah, I understand. So that's what the master meant. Several people exclaimed. I am guilty. I actually doubted Master Sandanyan just now. I am guilty. A person said repeatedly with a face full of remorse. Every move is Buddhist. This is a master. The crowd could not help but exclaim. Master Sandanyan was indeed an eminent monk of his generation. After being seen through, he could still maintain a calm expression. He smiled and glanced at Li Yi. Was that what he meant? Was that really what he meant? Yes, if young benefactor Li Yi said so, then so be it. The one who knows me is young benefactor Li Yi. Chapter 365. All living beings are Buddhas. You and I are Buddhas. Master has already told us the answer. So that's what Master Tan Yin meant when he looked at us just now. With the reminder of the handsome young man, everyone finally understood Master Tan Yin's deep meaning. The master was indeed a master, able to demonstrate Buddhist principles to an intangible level. They couldn't help but admire him deeply. Of course, the few people who had doubts about Master Tan Yin just now regretted it so much that their intestines turned green. This was disrespectful to Master Tan Yin and also to Buddha. After they went back, they must donate more incense money to wash away their sins. As for the handsome young man who had high attainments in Buddhist Dharma, he naturally won the favor of everyone. They didn't know which family this young man came from. The younger generation will surpass the older generation. The monks of Cold Mountain Temple were overjoyed. With Li Yi's reminder, they immediately remembered which eminent monk of the former Tang dynasty had said that sentence. It was the wise words of the sixth patriarch, and the foreign monks couldn't refute it. Because to refute this sentence was to refute the sixth patriarch and to refute themselves. The monks had all heard of this sentence, but they didn't expect it to be able to answer that question. They sighed in their hearts. Compared to this young benefactor, their cultivation was still not enough. Some people were happy, some people were sad. The monks of Cold Mountain Temple were happy, but the expressions of the young monks of the Qi Kingdom suddenly changed. They didn't expect that they would be able to solve the problem so quickly, and in such an incredible way. This was like going for wool and coming home shorn. It didn't stump the monks of Cold Mountain Temple, but helped them become famous. All living beings are Buddhas. Master Tanin, you really live up to your reputation. Old monk Xianxia had a smile on his face all along, but when he spoke he looked at Li Yi with an inexplicable gaze. As for the monk with the iron rod, who Emingzu called a sadhu, his expression was as calm as ever. Master really means this. Li Xian looked at Li Yi suspiciously. He did not believe that Li Yi had the ability to read minds, nor did he believe that Master Tanin really thought so. He only believed that with Li Yi's mouth he could turn black into white and wrong into right. He had a deep understanding of what the monk meant by renouncing asceticism. Is that important? Li Yi glanced at him and whispered. Is it not important? Is it important? Is it not important? Son-in-law. While Li Yi and Li Xian were debating about philosophy, an exclamation suddenly came from the opposite side of the crowd. Xiao Huan was holding a paper bag in her hand, carefully squeezing through the crowd. Walking up to Li Yi, he happily waved the paper bag in his hand and said, "Son-in-law, try this. This is the flour cake I just bought outside. It's delicious." Li Yi pinched a piece and put it in his mouth. Although the taste was not as good as Ruoqing's, it was still passable. He looked at Xiao Huan and asked, "Why are you here alone? Where is Miss?" "Miss is accompanying the old madam to listen to the master's sermon. I sneaked out alone." The little servant girl said happily, "I will go find them now and tell them that the master has also come." She wanted to hurry back, but because she was in too much of a hurry she accidentally dropped the paper bag in her hand. The pastries scattered all over the ground, and a few pieces even landed on the shoes of the old monk Xianxia who was closest to her. Sorry. She hurriedly crouched down to pick them up. Just as she was about to pick up a piece that had fallen by the monk's feet, a stern expression suddenly appeared on the monk's face. He shouted in a low voice, "Go away." Finishing, he lifted his foot and kicked the little servant girl. Clang. At the same time, a palace guard felt the long knife at his waist suddenly leave its sheath. A flash of knife light shot out and headed straight for the monk's thigh. The monk could still kick the little servant girl away, but the price would be one of his legs. Whether this was a good deal or not, it could be understood just by thinking about it. In the next moment he did not hesitate to pull his foot back. Li Yi helped the little servant girl up and threw the knife in his hand to the guard. He looked at the monk of the Qi kingdom with a cold gaze. The monk hates women the most. He does not like women to get close to him. Emingzu came forward to explain. This sudden scene interrupted Master Tanin and Xianxia's affectionate gaze. The surrounding people's gazes also temporarily shifted over. "Dinan, do not be rude." Xianxia spoke up to stop the middle-aged monk who was holding the iron rod tightly. "Is this all your Buddha has taught you?" Li Yi asked the monk with narrowed eyes. The surrounding people also understood what had just happened and the atmosphere became a little noisy. That monk actually dared to commit murder here. It's better to drag him out and beat him to death to avoid being an eyesore. After someone made a suggestion, it was unanimously agreed by everyone. "Who are you?" The middle-aged monk's eyes were filled with violence as he asked in a low voice. "You don't know who I am?" Li Yi looked at him and did not hide the coldness in his eyes. "Why would I?" The middle-aged monk had just said these 3 words when Xianxia suddenly stepped in front of him and stopped him from continuing. Xianxia's expression finally changed. He looked up at Li Yi and said slowly, "I did not expect there to be such a powerful person in the Jing kingdom. I was blind and did not recognize a master. May I ask, young benefactor, who are you? What are they talking about?" The proud girl's face was filled with confusion as she looked up at Li Xian and asked. "I don't know." Li Xian shook his head. His mind was also a mess. However, there was one thing he was very clear about. This group of foreign monks was probably not going to have it easy this time. The expression on Li Mingzhu's face was also puzzled. One of the masters who taught her martial arts was an eminent Buddhist monk. Under the influence of what she saw and heard, although she couldn't say that she was well versed in Buddhism, she had some foundation. However, she was still confused by the conversation between Li Yi and the old monk. It wasn't just Shou Ning and Li Xian. Everyone present had a blank look on their faces. Once again they felt like their IQ wasn't enough. That young man had clearly only asked a question that could not be any more ordinary. How did he become a mighty figure and an expert? Was there something wrong with the old monk with the Buddhist name of Xianxia? When they looked at Master Tan, they found that the master seemed to have fallen into deep thought. Could it be that there was really something profound about that question? Everyone could not help but have this thought. They turned around and looked at each other. They could see the confusion in each other's eyes. This young benefactor's understanding of Buddhism has probably reached another level. At this moment, the old monk who was slapped back by the sadhu said softly, "Master, what do they mean?" Just as everyone was scratching their heads, someone finally appeared who understood. The old monk's shiny head suddenly became the focus of the crowd. Amitabha. The old monk chanted the name of Buddha and explained, "The question young benefactor asked just now was who am I?" Seems simple, but it actually contains great wisdom. The I in the question is not the I that we think. To answer this question, we must first jump out of the I and look at everything around us with a detached heart. Therefore, this question young benefactor asked is extremely difficult to answer. And Master Zhou Xian's question of, "Who are you?" is also similar to this question. Hearing the old monk's words, everyone was stunned. The expression on their faces was even more confused than before. What? Who am I? I am me, I am not me. Jump out of the mother ***, who am I? He was a master after all. With just a few words he made them doubt their lives. They still did not understand what the crux of the question was. However, they finally understood one thing. This young man's dharma was very profound, so profound that they couldn't see through it at all. The old monk named Zhou Xian couldn't answer the question he had asked just now, so he beat around the bush and kicked the question back at him. Can't this foreign monk have some shame? In an instant, everyone looked at monk Zhou Xian with incomparable contempt. Chapter 366. For a normal person, who am I? Was not a question at all. If they asked it in public, they might be arrested as a lunatic. But for a small group of people, this was the first question of the 3 ultimate philosophical questions in the world. This small group of people included philosophers and monks, especially eminent monks of great virtue. Who am I? Where do I come from? Where am I going? This question had troubled philosophers for thousands of years without a conclusion, so how could a monk answer it? Who am I? Li Yi smiled and said, "I am just an ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom." At this moment, Li Yi had replaced Master Tan and become the focus of the crowd. Therefore, every word he said attracted the attention of the crowd. An ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom. What Buddhist principles does this sentence contain? I don't know, but it's definitely not as simple as we think. Master, quickly explain, what does this sentence mean? The old monk from the cold mountain temple who was acting as a translator shook his head helplessly. Regarding the question just now, this young benefactor had clearly changed his concept and did not give a direct answer. Or did he not understand the deeper meaning behind it? The old monk sighed inwardly. His attainments in the Dharma were still insufficient, so he simply kept his mouth shut. The old monk Zhou Xian sighed and said, "An ordinary citizen of the Jing kingdom has such attainments. The capital is indeed a place of hidden dragons and crouching tigers." Li Yi ignored the old monk. He picked up the pastries on the ground, wrapped them in paper and threw them into the garbage bucket at the side. He patted the shoulders of the obviously frightened servant girl and asked, "Are you all right?" "Son-in-law, I'm fine." Xiao Huan raised her head to look at Li Yi and said with a smile, "I don't care which country you are from. If you dare to cause trouble again, you will be dragged out and beaten to death." "No one will help you," Li Yi said coldly as he looked at the group of foreign monks. Shouldn't monks be diligently cultivating Buddhism to deliver all living beings from suffering? To fight for power and profit and cause trouble in other monasteries? Did they really think that they could become masters just because they shaved their heads? Master Tan took a step forward and stood shoulder to shoulder with Li Yi, saying, "Cold Mountain Temple's Water and Land Assembly, everyone who comes is a guest. If you have other intentions, please go back to where you came from." Even Master Tan had stood up, so there was naturally no need for everyone to be patient. That's right. How dare a foreign monk behave atrociously in the land of our Jing kingdom? Are you courting death? You can't even win against a master in terms of Zen, and you still have the face to stand here? Scram if you know what's good for you. Otherwise, don't blame us for being impolite. Not only did the foreign monk Luan Fo who came to make a scene not talk about great Master Tan Yin, he couldn't even be compared to an ordinary young man of their Jing state. If he made any more outrageous moves, the nobles present might really do something. We're here to discuss Zen and cultivate Buddhism. Is this the attitude of your Cold Mountain Temple? What a famous temple in the Jing kingdom, it's just SSO. A young monk behind the old monk Xianxia said angrily. The Buddha is not broken. Cultivate yourselves first. Li Yi said faintly. Only he would waste his time talking to these monks. If it were Miss Lu, she would have cut off his head with her sword and kicked him around like a ball, just based on what the monk with the iron rod had done just now. His words made the young monk choke and speechless. Master Tan Yin and the old monk of the Cold Mountain Temple looked surprised. The people around them were stunned for a moment. When they came back to their senses, they all exclaimed, Buddha isn't broken. Cultivate yourselves first? Wonderful, truly wonderful. This young man's attainments in Buddhism are indeed profound. Well said, foreign monk. Go back and cultivate yourselves first. As soon as Li Yi said this, everyone applauded. The other party said that they should discuss Zen and cultivate Buddhism, but the next moment he said, Buddha isn't broken. Cultivate yourselves first. Seeing the foreign monk being defeated, everyone felt extremely happy. What foreign monk? How dare he come to the Cold Mountain Temple to cause trouble? Master Tan Yin and the real monks didn't even do much, but they all fell to the hands of a young man who wasn't even a monk. How could they still be called monks? Cultivate Buddhism, cultivate Buddhism. This cultivation is not the cultivation of others. Young benefactor, you're too stubborn, Monk Xianxia said with a kind expression. Master, you keep talking about cultivating Buddhism. Tell me, what is Buddha? Li looked at him and asked. They were the ones who provoked them first. If they didn't teach them a lesson, they would really think that they were easy to bully. Everyone secretly applauded. This was giving them a taste of their own medicine. The old monk's question was also kicked back to him. What is Buddha? They wanted to see how the old monk would answer. Amit Ba. Monk Xianxia chanted and said, Buddha is wisdom, virtue and compassion. You are Buddha, I am Buddha, all living beings are Buddha, Buddha is everywhere and Buddha is omnipotent. Shameless. Isn't that what this young man said just now? Plagiarism. This is blatant plagiarism. This old monk is too shameless. Hearing Monk Xianxia's answer, everyone was filled with righteous indignation. They all spoke up and condemned this shameless plagiarism. Buddha is everywhere. Li Yi suddenly asked. Buddha is everywhere, the old monk answered. Buddha is omnipotent? Li Yi asked again. Buddha is omnipotent, the old monk answered again. If that's the case. Li Yi crossed his arms and looked at him. He said slowly, Can your Buddha create a stone that he can't move? Old monk Xianxia moved his lips as if he wanted to speak, but then he fell silent. Master Tan Yin frowned and seemed to be deep in thought, leaving the confused crowd behind. Why isn't the monk talking? Is he also invisibly demonstrating the Dharma? Can Buddha create a stone that he can't move? Of course he can. Buddha is omnipotent. Idiot. Since Buddha is omnipotent, why can't he move a stone? Oh, I understand. Buddha can't create a stone that he can't move. Idiot. Since Buddha is omnipotent, why can't he create a stone that he can't move? Who are you calling an idiot? I dare you to say it again. Idiot. Ignoring the two people fighting outside, everyone looked shocked. When they looked at the young man inside, they suddenly felt like they were looking up to a great mountain. How did he come up with this question? This was simply not giving the old monk a way out. No matter what he said, it would be wrong unless he took back what he said and admitted that Buddha was not omnipotent. But was this something a monk could say? He had actually sent all the foreign monks to their deaths with just his mouth. This was a master, a true master. While everyone was thinking about how Buddha could move the stone, Li Yi had already passed through the crowd with the young maidservant and left. The question, can Buddha create a stone that he can't move, was adapted from a famous paradox in another world, called God's paradox. God's paradox meant, God is not omnipotent. The Vatican in another world published a book that used the most popular mathematical deduction at the time to conclude that God is omnipotent. At this time, a wise man asked tit for tat, can God create a stone that he can't move? So this wise man was in big trouble. Regardless of whether this story was true or false, and regardless of whether this wise man was eventually tied to a pillar and burned to death, a paradox was a paradox because it could never have an answer unless the original hypothesis was overturned. Obviously, it was a hypothesis that old monk Xianxia could not overturn. Therefore, for a long time to come, he would be trapped in this paradox and unable to extricate himself. Chapter 367. We have troubled you. Please don't blame us, Master Tanyin. I'll take my leave. Master Xianxia left, and so did the monks from the Qi kingdom. They had no choice but to leave. They had come to talk about Zen and Buddhism, but if they ended up renouncing asceticism, it would be the biggest joke in the world. Before the middle-aged monk with the iron rod left, he scanned the crowd with his gaze before leaving expressionlessly. They had come aggressively and confidently, but when they left, they were crestfallen and looked a little embarrassed as if they were fleeing. Master, you have a profound dharma. I admire you. Master Tanyin accepted the worship of the crowd as a matter of course. Among all the monks in the world who could demonstrate Buddhist etiquette invisibly. Presumably, after today, Master Tanyin's reputation in Buddhism would reach a new peak. Hey, where's that young man? Someone suddenly asked in confusion. When it came to defeating the foreign monk, that young man deserved the most credit. His words made everyone feel a little dizzy even now when they thought about it. He left. He just left, someone said, pointing in a certain direction. I wonder which family he is from. He is proficient in Dharma and has a deep affinity with Buddhism. He can be said to be an outstanding talent among the younger generation, someone said with a sigh. I know who he is. Tell us quickly. The crowd curiously gathered around a man in embroidered clothes. Although you haven't seen him, you should have heard of his name. The man in embroidered clothes said. He is the eldest grandson of the Li family who has been in the limelight recently. His calligraphy is better than Zhou Xian's, and he was conferred the title of Chong and county magistrate by His Majesty. After being reminded by the man in embroidered clothes, the crowd immediately thought of something. The eldest grandson of the Li family was also a well-known figure in the capital recently. He was the only viscount conferred by His Majesty for many years. It was said that he was very close to Prince Ning's son and the princess. It was also said that he had a close relationship with Master Tanyin. No wonder. He had such a profound dharma, so it was not strange that he was friends with Master Tanyin. The foreign monks came and left quickly. In fact, they did not cause much of a commotion. Most people did not know about it. After the crowd dispersed, the water and land ritual assembly continued according to the proper procedure. The monks of the cold mountain temple breathed a sigh of relief. Those who should leave had finally left. Today was a special day. If there was any trouble, they would be laughed at by the world. The old monk repeatedly instructed the little monk guarding the door that if any other monks came, he must ask them about their background and not let anything like what happened just now happen again. That young benefactor really helped us this time, the old monk said with some lingering fear. The other party had come with ill intentions, and with their methods, even Master Tanyin was somewhat unable to withstand them. If the young benefactor had not stood up to help them from the beginning, they would have been the ones in a difficult situation today. Master Tanyin was silent for a moment before saying, entertain the Li family's old madam and the Li family members well. Do not neglect them. Then he walked into the quiet room. About it. Li mastered. Tant mastered. Tanyin's. Li was not a philosopher, nor was he an eminent monk. Therefore it was rare for him to be in a situation where his thoughts were not clear. Li Xian was not a philosopher. He was not a monk of great virtue. So he could not go around as he pleased. Li Xian went to meet up with his heir's concubine. His father-in-law also had elders present, so he couldn't wander around as he pleased. Li Immerse stood at the side and said, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, the cold mountain temple would have been humiliated by the monks of the Qi kingdom. If this got out, our Jing kingdom would have lost face too. Then he asked, when did you start practicing Buddhism? I don't know anything about Buddhism. It's easy to talk to these monks. When you can't even understand what you're saying, you can scare them. Li said casually. Those monks of great virtue were not normal people. If he wanted to talk to them normally, he had to become abnormal first. Immerse thought about it and said, we are like fire and water with the Qi kingdom. They are afraid of God's law. They won't act rashly on the surface, but they will definitely take action in other ways. What happened just now is an example. I don't know what else they will do. The monks of the Qi kingdom have always been different from Buddhism. They are loyal to the royal family. If they target you, it will be troublesome. You have to be more careful. What a pity. You were born a girl. Li Yi sighed. What do you mean? Mingzu raised her eyebrows and asked. Li Yi said, if you were a prince and could become the emperor in the future, the Jing kingdom would be governed well by you. Mingzu didn't say anything. Even though she was a prince, she didn't want to be the emperor. She just wanted to see the Li dynasty prosper. That was all. It's good to be a princess. There's nothing to pity, she said, shaking her head. Li Yi glanced at her. His gaze lingered on a certain tall and straight spot. He nodded and said, it's good to be a princess. How are we going to explain this to the third prince? Outside the cold mountain temple, a young monk said with a bitter expression. The old monk Zhou Xian looked at the sky in the distance and said nothing. Bang! The monk named Du Nan slammed his iron rod on the ground, causing mud to fly everywhere. The iron rod sank deep into the ground. If that person hadn't interfered, how could the monks of the cold mountain temple defeat us? Du Nan's expression was ferocious. He didn't look like a monk at all. He said coldly, as long as Tan Yin agrees to compete with me in meditation, his reputation will be ruined after he loses. No one will believe him. How can he be a monk then? At that time, our people will successfully take over the cold mountain temple. In time we will definitely unify the Buddhism in the Jing kingdom. No matter who spoils the third prince's plan, they will go to a Vichy hell. The few young monks quietly kept a distance from the sadhu. Although they were all monks, the sadhu was clearly an extremely paranoid pervert. If it was not necessary, they would never want to deal with such a person for the rest of their lives. Amit Ba. Now that the third prince is here, I will give him an explanation. The old monk Zhou Xian looked defeated. On one side was the country and on the other was his faith. How to choose was even more difficult for him than the question of whether Buddha was omnipotent. Old monk Zhou Xian took a deep look at the middle-aged monk before he slowly walked down the mountain. The few young monks hurriedly followed him. The middle-aged sadhu looked back into the temple. A hint of darkness flashed across his face. He pulled out his iron rod and walked in another direction. Chapter 368. Once a person has obtained great material satisfaction, they will turn to pursue other things in order to achieve spiritual satisfaction. The nobles in the capital city were at the top of the society. They did not need to worry about food and clothing, so they would worry about other things. They worried about the past life, the present life, and the next life. Therefore, they came here on the first day of the Water and Land Dharma Assembly in the Cold Mountain Temple to listen to the preaching of the eminent monks. They hoped to release the sufferings of the past and avoid falling into the hungry ghost realm or the hell realm in their next life, so that they could be reincarnated into a good family. Old Madam was worried about when she could hold a great-grandson in her arms, so she dragged Ru Yi to various temples. After listening to the Avatamsaka Sutra and the Surangama Sutra, after listening to the Surangama Sutra and the Diamond Sutra, only Ru Yi's temperament could calm down. Second Miss Lu had long left the organization. She found Li Yi and Xiao Huan and drank tea in a quiet meditation room in the backyard. The little monk of the Cold Mountain Temple was very polite to Li Yi. He just wanted to find a quiet place to rest, so the little monk brought them here. The surroundings were so quiet that they could not hear the noise outside at all. The tea was also good tea. It was fragrant and had a lingering aftertaste. In addition to the excellent attitude, he also received a gift from the Cold Mountain Temple. A wooden tablet the size of half a palm emerged from his chest. The wooden tablet was purple and slightly heavy in his hand. There were several blooming lotus flowers carved on the front, emitting a faint fragrance. It looked like sandalwood. Sandalwood was precious, but such a small piece could not be sold for much money. The old monk was too stingy, and the Cold Mountain Temple was not particular either. They gave them scriptures and helped them to repel the enemy, but they only gave them such a small wooden tablet. It was not sincere. If the little monk did not say that this wooden tablet could be used in any temple in the Jing kingdom, he would have thrown it to Xianxia to play with. The sun was shining brightly outside, and the tea in the meditation room was strong. Mississippi Lu was also quiet, which was rare. She quietly sat opposite Li Yi and drank tea. The extremely friendly attitude of the monks made her a little embarrassed to ask them to compare martial arts. Xiao Huan was bragging about Li Yi's great feats. With just a few words, she had rendered the foreign monk who had come to cause trouble speechless. Lu Rui looked up. It was no wonder she had heard quite a number of people discussing Chang'an County on her way here. She had not realized it back then, and only now did she realize who they were talking about. To Li Yi, there wasn't much to see in the water and land spell assembly. If he hadn't been dragged out by Li Xian in the morning, he would have been comfortably basking in the sun at home. This spell assembly would last for a full 7 days. From the looks of it, the old mistress didn't seem to have any intention of going back in the near future. Li Yi decided to go back with Xiao Huan and the others first. He would take advantage of these few days to prepare for his lessons. He would compress all the content he had to say in a few days and let them digest it slowly. In this way he would have enough time to deal with the affairs of Qing and Prefecture and have a perfect honeymoon. The tea in Cold Mountain Temple was good. Before he left, he asked the little monk to pack 2 caddies of tea. Seeing the pained look on his face, he had a deeper understanding of Cold Mountain Temple's stinginess. The little monk wanted to cry but had no tears as he watched Li Yi leave. If not for the abbot's instructions, such tea would not be used to entertain guests. It should be known that a few days ago, even the Prime Minister couldn't get 1 caddy of tea to taste. That was 2 caddies. Just now, the foreign monk came to make trouble and wanted to discuss Zen with Master Tanin. It's such a pity that you didn't see the scene. What? There was such a thing? Of course. That old monk asked Master Tanin what is Buddha. Guess what Master Tanin said? Master Tanin didn't say anything. What a good way to demonstrate Buddhism invisibly. I'm afraid ordinary people like us can't reach Master Tanin's realm in our lifetime. Not to mention Master Tanin, I'll be very satisfied if I can reach the realm of the son of Chang'an County in my lifetime. What son of Chang'an County? The discussion of Zen just now was very exciting. Not only did everyone see what it meant to demonstrate Buddhist principles invisibly, but they also witnessed a young man defeating a Buddhist master with just a few words. As they chatted, they soon had new topics to talk about. Even, who am I? Who am I? Can Buddha create a stone that he can't lift himself? Became the most discussed questions among them. The popularity of His Majesty's title of nobility had not died down yet. The 4 words son of Chang'an County appeared frequently in their ears. Now there was another wave of enthusiasm on the original basis. The king of Shu and a few young talents stood under a plum tree. He smiled and said, "This son of Chang'an County is also an extraordinary person. If there's a chance, I must get to know him." A young man standing behind the king of Shu hesitated for a moment and said, "Your Highness, actually, you've met the son of Chang'an County just now." Qin Liqing found it hard to describe his current feelings. It had only been a few days. How did he become the son of Chang'an County? Wasn't he supposed to be a talent with no background in Qing in Prefecture? Even Duke Chen's mansion was quite afraid of him. When the young master of the mansion was bullied, they didn't even come to question him. Instead, they strictly ordered everyone not to have any conflicts with the Li family. Oh. The king of Shu looked at him and a trace of doubt appeared on his face. He asked, "I saw him just now." Qin Liqing had also successfully hooked up with the king of Shu in recent days. Hearing this, he didn't dare to be negligent. He immediately replied, "The person standing beside the crown prince of King Ning, Li Xian, is the son of Chang'an County, Li Yi. So it's him." The king of Shu narrowed his eyes. He had long heard that the son of Chang'an County had a close relationship with Li Xian. However, he didn't expect that the person just now was the son of Chang'an County that his father, the emperor, had made an exception to confer. Others didn't know the details of this son of Chang'an County. They just thought that he was lucky to be favored by the emperor. However, as a prince, he knew some secrets about him. Every single thing that he had done could be said to be earth-shattering, especially the heavenly punishment. Although he did not know what it was, he knew that it was the heavenly punishment that had played a role in their victory in the war against the Qi kingdom. It could make the Jing kingdom stronger and defeat the Qi kingdom. What kind of weapon was it? This was also the reason why his father, the emperor, valued him so much. If he also had such a help, he wouldn't have to worry about not being able to achieve great things. He was the son of imperial concubine Cui, and was the prince with the highest chance of inheriting the throne. He was knowledgeable and well-versed in both the literary and military arts. He had a wide circle of friends, and many of the young talents of the noble families in the capital followed his lead. His background was deep, and not only did he have the support of the powerful Cui family, but many of the senior members of the court were also his supporters. Countless people, including himself, believed that he would be the next emperor of the Jing kingdom. However, the current emperor didn't seem to think so. The crown prince hadn't been appointed yet and the eastern palace was empty. As time went by, he became more and more uneasy. He wanted to control more resources so that after his father passed away, no one could stop him from ascending the throne. He had never doubted his father's judgment. The fact that the emperor valued the son of Chong and county so much meant that there must be something that the emperor valued. Similarly, he also valued it. He was the dignified king of Shu, the next monarch of the Jing kingdom. As for Li Xian, he was just a crown prince. Smart people should be able to distinguish which one was more important. Chapter 369. Li Yi and the other two came out of the meditation room and walked out of the cold mountain temple, ready to go home. Along the way, they heard many people talking about what just happened. Li Yi was actually not willing to be in the limelight. The monk with the iron rod was too much of a bully. A foreign monk dared to be so arrogant in the land of the Jing kingdom. Of course, the most important thing was that Xiao Huan was involved. If that bastard had not dodged so quickly, he would have lost a leg. The family's carriage and the Li residences were parked together. He told the coachman to inform the old mistress and Rui. Li Yi, Rui and Xiao Huan went back first. As long as it was not on the city's green stone slabs, the carriage was a kind of torture. The carriage slowly went down the mountain path, shaking violently. Li Yi did not forget the suffering he and Li Xian suffered when they went up the mountain, so he decided to go down the stone steps. The carriage from the residence would wait for them at the foot of the mountain. The Cold Mountain Temple's Water and Land Conference was originally very lively, but today was a special event for the dignitaries. The path that ordinary believers took was even less crowded than usual. Wait a minute. Li Yi was educating Xiao Huan about the bodhisattva's gender. The little servant girl's mouth was in an O shape because she found out that the bodhisattva was a man. Mississippi Lu suddenly stopped and whispered. Li Yi stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her. Who is it? Come out. Mississippi Lu walked in front of Li Yi and Xiao Huan and said lightly. Under Li Yi's surprised gaze, a figure walked out of the dense forest in front of them. It's him. Li Yi's pupils shrank slightly. You know him? Mississippi Lu turned around and asked. Li Yi quickly answered, it's the foreign monk just now. He's the one who almost hurt Xiao Huan. This poor monk is here to send you to paradise early. The middle-aged monk was expressionless. Although he still had doubts about the exposure of his tracks, it was no longer important. Holding the iron rod in his hand, he dashed towards Li Yi. Mississippi Lu's eyes flashed. It was enough for her to know that the other party was an enemy and not a friend. Plang. A white light flashed like a waterfall and her figure instantly disappeared on the spot. Li Yi guarded Xiao Huan behind him in case there were other monks rushing out from other places. Soon it was proven that the monk had come alone to deliver his head. Li Yi was not worried about Rui's safety. Although the monk gave him a dangerous feeling, he was probably not as dangerous as Rui. Sure enough, although the iron rod in the monk's hand was powerful, and every swing of it was as heavy as 1,000 caddies, the stone slabs of the stairs would scatter in all directions. However, it could not even touch the corner of Mississippi Lu's clothes. Seeing that she was like a butterfly fluttering in the wind, strolling leisurely amidst the shadows of the staff that filled the sky, the last bit of nervousness in Li Yi's heart disappeared at once. Instead, he was a little envious. He was afraid that he would not be able to reach her state in his lifetime. However, looking at the monk who was like a human flesh destroyer, he could not help but feel a chill. If the iron rod hit him, it would not just be a matter of breaking a few ribs. Deep anger rose in his heart. Was this still a damn monk? If he did not go down the mountain with Rui today, he would not have a good ending. Just for such a small matter did he have to fight and kill? Madman, this was a **king madman. Li Yi did not know that at this moment, the madman in his heart had cold sweat on his bald head. He had originally thought that with his martial arts, It would not take much effort for him to deal with the young man who did not even have the strength to truss a chicken. However, he did not expect that this woman who had appeared out of nowhere would become an insurmountable mountain in front of him. Lu Rui only exchanged a few blows with the monk who blocked her way, and she frowned. Not to say that they were evenly matched, she had thought that she would meet an expert who could catch her eye. However, apart from brute force, this monk had no other skills. He was even far inferior to the old monk named Tan Yin. She was not in the mood to tangle with him anymore. With a thought, the sword in her hand suddenly sped up, and a deep cut appeared on the middle-aged monk's arm. The iron rod also fell from his hand. Knowing that it was impossible to take that person's life today, if she continued to tangle with him, she was afraid that even she would have to die here. The middle-aged monk no longer cared about the iron rod, and with a stamp of his toes, he flew backward and disappeared into the depths of the forest in an instant. Mississippi Lu originally wanted to chase after him, but after looking back at Li Yi and Xiao Huan, she stopped. Damn crazy monk. Encountering a crazy monk, Li Yi's face was slightly gloomy. After going down the mountain, he did not go home first, but directly went to the county government. The capital magistrate had just been banished, and the new capital magistrate had not yet taken office. All the affairs of the county government, big or small, were personally handled by the county magistrate. The current Li Yi was not the same as before. He would not sit on the bench in the county government. As long as it was related to nobility, it would be a big deal. The county magistrate patted his chest and said that he would definitely increase the efforts to thoroughly investigate this matter. The portraits of the monks from the Qi kingdom were also drawn by Li Yi. As long as they submitted them to the Ministry of Justice, they would issue a wanted notice. Within the capital and the surrounding counties, there would no longer be a place for those monks to hide. Uncle Li these days asked the guards at home to tighten the patrol and pay special attention to the monks who appear in the village. After returning home, Li Yi specially reminded Uncle Li, "Young master, rest assured. If they dare to come, I will definitely not let them go back." Uncle Li's face flashed with an ominous glint. After saying these harsh words, he immediately went to warn the guards in the manor. Mingzi was right. Those monks without eyebrows and holding iron rods were indeed crazy. Who knew what they would do? Li Yi somewhat regretted asking Rui to let him go just now. This kind of person who hid in the dark and did not know when he would stab you with a knife was the best way to solve the problem once and for all. At this moment, on an official road outside the capital, a horse carriage was speeding at high speed. "I have said that I will give the third prince an explanation for this matter. Why did you act on your own?" Old monk Xianxia looked at the pale-faced middle-aged monk and said with a frown. At this moment, the middle-aged monk's face was as pale as a piece of paper. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat. The wound on his right arm was wrapped with a white cloth, and blood was continuously seeping out. However, although his face was pale, his expression was rather calm, as if he was not the one who was injured. In the face of old monk Xianxia's questioning, he did not say a word. "After all, we are foreigners. There is no longer a place for us to stay in the capital after assassinating the nobles of the Jing kingdom. We must leave immediately," the old monk said again. Then he sat upright and did not say a word. Chapter 370. Hey, the guard from the Viscount's residence actually came to my house just now. He said that we should pay more attention to strangers around the manor, especially monks. I wonder what's going on. What happened to the monks? Did they offend Lord Zhu? In the manor where the Viscount's residence was located, a few villagers squatted on the ground and chatted. "He also came to my house, he also came to my house." Another person nodded vigorously and said, "The guard from the Viscount's residence said that if anything goes wrong, we should report it to the Viscount's residence in time. If we can provide useful information to Lord Zhu, there will be a monetary reward." Someone immediately took over the conversation and said, "I came back from the city today. There are notices everywhere in the city for the arrest of a few monks. It might have something to do with this matter. But then again, if any monks really appear in the manor, we have to quickly report to Lord Zhu. A monetary reward, how long will it take to earn?" A monetary reward was undoubtedly a huge sum of money for these farmers who lived on the land with their backs to the sky. Under the stimulation of the monetary reward, the word monk had become a sensitive point for them. Any bald person would have nowhere to hide under the noses of these farmers. For Li Yi, his home was undoubtedly the safest place in the entire capital. Even the palace could not compare to it. With Rui and Rui personally guarding him, as long as it was not a group of 100 monks with high martial arts skills who came to hunt him down, there was no need to worry about his safety. Moreover, the arrest warrant for those monks had been posted all over the capital. If that monk had a slightly normal IQ, he would have long hidden far away. Li Yi soon stopped thinking about the crazy monk. For the past few days he had been compiling textbooks at home. First Grade Mathematics, Volume 1. The princesses and princes still had some foundation in mathematics. After understanding and getting used to the usage of Arabic numerals, they could barely skip kindergarten and reach the level of first grade. There were many sets of textbooks that could be used, but none of them could be used directly. Therefore, Li Yi still needed to start from the beginning. He had to recompile the things in the original textbooks in a way that was acceptable to the current people. This included understanding Arabic numerals, comparison of numbers, addition and subtraction within 100, addition and subtraction, and so on. These were all new concepts for the little prince and princess, and it would take them a while to digest. This textbook, which he had added and deleted several times, could be used as an introductory mathematics book for young children. Perhaps in a few years, when the young children of the Jing kingdom memorized the rules for disciples, and saw a bunch of strange symbols in the book, they would curse Mr. Li Yi in their hearts. Apart from editing books, he did not neglect his martial arts training. The fact that he had run into a mad monk while he was going up the mountain to pray to Buddha once again proved how dangerous the world he was currently in was. If he did not have the ability to protect himself, he would have to bring Rui or Mississippi Lu with him wherever he went in the future. He practiced the new moves that Mississippi Lu taught him a few more times. When he felt that he had understood most of them, he turned around and realized that Uncle Li had been standing at the door for a long time. "Uncle Li, what's the matter?" Li Yi wet a towel and asked while wiping his sweat. Uncle Li held a gilded invitation in his hand and said, "Young master, the King of Shu just sent an invitation to invite you to a banquet at the King of Shu's mansion in 3 days." "The King of Shu?" Li Yi's hands paused. Uncle Li nodded and said with a smile, "Among the princes, the King of Shu is the one who is most likely to inherit the throne. He likes to make friends with young talents and often holds banquets at his mansion to invite many talents. Everyone in the capital knows about him. Although young master has been conferred the title of the county magistrate of Chong, and by His Majesty, you have no foundation in the capital. You can take this opportunity to get to know the young talents of other families in the capital. If you can make friends with the King of Shu, it will be even more beneficial." Li Yi frowned slightly. He had only met the King of Shu once. They couldn't even be considered as acquaintances. Why did the King of Shu invite him? Moreover, he didn't forget that the King of Shu had a deep grudge with Zhou Xian. From the bottom of his heart, Li Yi didn't want to attend the banquet at the King of Shu's mansion. However, the identity of the King of Shu was too embarrassing. If he directly rejected the invitation, he would offend the king too much. It was fine in the short term, but if he really became the emperor in the future, he would have the final say in the huge Jing kingdom. How could he continue to stay in the Jing kingdom? Nowadays, Li Yi had long gotten used to the rules of this world. He would no longer act foolishly without considering the consequences. It was obviously not a wise choice to offend the King of Shu. Even if it wasn't for himself, he had to think about the Li family and the Viscount's mansion. Of course, it was also necessary to talk to Zhou Xian. This invitation, just leave it for now. Even if he attended the banquet, it would be 3 days later. Li Yi had to go to the imperial palace now. This matter could be discussed after he came back. The person accompanying him was Mississippi Lu. Although it would be safer to have Rui accompany him, she was now a viscount's wife. It was not appropriate for her to go out all day. Mississippi Lu didn't have this concern. After Li Yi entered the imperial palace, she wandered around the city alone. After 2 hours, she would pick him up at the entrance of the imperial palace. As usual, he first checked on the princes and princesses' homework. The results were very satisfactory. He didn't know whether they were worried that they would be criticized by the entire imperial palace if they scored 0, or if they really woke up and wanted to study hard in the future. At the very least, all of them could write the numbers taught in the previous lesson. What he needed to do now was to make them forget about counting and get used to this new, simpler and more convenient method. After the 2-hour lecture, Li Yi left the teaching materials behind and told Xianxia to send someone to make a few copies. In the next lecture he wanted everyone to have a copy. Immerse was waiting for him outside the hall. The business cooperation between the two families had already been put on the agenda. Other than ruidu and hard liquor, she also had ideas for perfume. She was very satisfied with the samples that Li Yi made last time. That kind of thing that could replace the perfume bag once it appeared would definitely be sought after by the daughters of the rich and powerful in the capital. Originally it was just a business between the two families. After Zhou Xian found out about it, he insisted on sticking his foot in. Although he had never personally asked about the business of the prince's mansion, he knew that ruidu and hard liquor had created a lot of profit for the prince's mansion. Now, compared to Qing'an Prefecture, the operation of the crown prince's mansion and the expenses for research were not small. This time he was the first to propose the production of perfume. Li Yi could be worried about the cooperation with the prince's mansion, but he had no such concerns with Zhou Xian and Immerse. Oh yes, are you familiar with the king of Shu? Li Yi suddenly thought of something and asked Immerse. Why are you suddenly asking this? Immerse turned to look at him. It's nothing much. Today the king of Shu sent someone to send me an invitation to attend the banquet at the king's mansion in 3 days. Even if he really wanted to attend, he had to find out what kind of person the king of Shu was, his temper, personality, sexual orientation, and so on. Although he had already told him some things about the king of Shu, beauty was in the eye of the beholder and stupidity was in the eye of the enemy. In view of the grudge between the two of them, he could only believe half of what he said. Immerse and he were brother and sister and grew up together. It was also a good breakthrough point. Chapter 371. The King of Shu's Invitation? Immerse hesitated for a moment before saying, Ever since I was young, I haven't had much contact with the King of Shu. However, he has always liked to make friends. Every few days the King of Shu's mansion will hold a banquet. You are now one of the nobles in the capital city and are of similar age to him. It's normal for you to receive an invitation. No way. You don't know him that well? Li Yi was a little surprised. Although the old emperor had countless concubines and most of the princes and princesses had the same father but different mothers, they were still siblings with the same blood. Even if they were not from the same mother, they would still have some feelings for each other. Could it be that his thinking had been wrong all along? On second thought, it seemed to be more normal. Princesses were fine, but all princes had the possibility of inheriting the supreme throne after the old emperor passed away. However, there was only one throne. In the end, it depended on each family's ability. A good prince who didn't want to become the emperor wasn't a good prince. Princes would be lucky if they didn't fight for the throne. It was not easy to see touching brotherly love. Given Mingzhu's character, it was unlikely that she would have many close brothers and sisters. She and Zhou Xian had been friends since they were young. The princes of the same age might have been beaten up by her when they were young. It was normal for them to be a little distant. Immerse thought for a moment and said, Since he has invited you, there's no harm in going if there's nothing urgent. Even she had said so. Li Yi asked in surprise, Is it really possible for the king of Shu to become the crown prince? No one knows what father is thinking. Immerse shook her head and said, But from the current situation the king of Shu has the greatest hope. Putting this aside, it's not good for you to embarrass a prince. It was obvious that Immerse did not have any prejudice against the king of Shu. At least on the surface he did not look like an evil person. Li already had an idea. When he passed by the cafeteria he habitually glanced at a certain corner. Li Yi was startled, then he turned around and asked Immerse, What's going on with Princess Yongning? Doesn't she need to go to school? Yongning is different from the other princesses. Father gave her special permission not to go to school. Immerse paused and said, What happened to Princess Yongning? Why did she become like this? Perhaps it was the feeling of déjà vu that caused Li Yi to involuntarily feel pity for the little princess. At the age of 6 or 7 she should be innocent and full of childlike interest. There was no reason for her to, and she definitely should not remain in that shadow forever. Her mother died young and she was seriously ill. This was what he heard from Princess Xianxia. Immerse was more than 10 years older than Yongning and grew up in the palace. He should know more about her. Why did you suddenly ask about Yongning? Immerse turned around and asked him. I want to see if I can help her. Li Yi said honestly. You have a way? Emingzi looked at him and a glimmer of light appeared in her eyes. Although she had never interacted with Yongning, she was still her younger sister. How could she not want her to become like a normal child? It's hard to say. I can only try first. Li Yi shook his head and said. All the imperial physicians in the palace, including the famous physicians among the people, had tried to treat Yongning, but none of them had succeeded. If there was someone in this world who could cure her, Emingzi believed that it must be Li Yi. Yongning is the daughter of concubine Liang. Concubine Liang died of an illness when Yongning was 2 years old. Perhaps because she lost her mother at a young age, Yongning's personality has always been rather eccentric. But it wasn't like this. She would occasionally play with princesses and princes of the same age. The reason why she became like this was because of a serious illness a year ago. At that time, Imperial Father summoned all the imperial physicians in the palace. The famous physicians in the capital were also summoned overnight. No one could do anything. They thought that Yongning would die, but they didn't expect that after one night she would miraculously wake up. Her illness was cured without treatment. Even the imperial physicians found it unbelievable. Emingzi sighed and said, however, although she survived, she seemed to have lost all her memories. Including Imperial Father, she didn't recognize anyone around her. The imperial physicians said that her brain might have been burnt and there was no hope for her to be cured in this lifetime. From then on she became even more eccentric. She never spoke to anyone and became like this. Li Yi heard this and frowned. He only knew a bit of modern medical knowledge and was not a divine physician. He had thought that Princess Yongning was just autistic, but he didn't expect the truth to be like this. If her brain was really burnt and she lost her memory, then things would be much more troublesome. In reality, whether it was amnesia or autism, even in the modern era, there was no particularly effective treatment. Things were much more troublesome than he had imagined. You go first. I'll go back myself in a while, he said to Emingzi and walked to a palace beside the dining hall. On the stone steps in the corner of the palace, the little girl was sitting there. She was still hugging the doll in her arms and staring at the ground with her head lowered. Hello, little girl. We meet again. Li Yi squatted down and smiled as he greeted her. Hearing the voice, the little girl raised her head. When she saw Li Yi, there seemed to be a hint of color in her eyes, but there seemed to be nothing. Li Yi took out the bead and waved it in front of her eyes. He reached out his other hand and said, "Thank you for the bead. I really like it. To thank you, how about I treat you to a meal?" Looking at the hand that was stretched out in front of her, the little girl was startled. A trace of hesitation appeared on her face. After a long time, she carefully reached out her hand and placed it in Li Yi's palm. Li Yi let out a long sigh in his heart. He had finally taken the first step. Looking at the two figures holding hands and walking into the dining hall, the manager of the dining hall was about to go crazy. Cucumbers, cucumbers, hide those 2 cucumbers well. Don't let him see them. Consort Chen specifically asked for them to be put on her face. Kunlun purple melons, Consort Yan's favorite. They were just delivered this morning and are still fresh. We can't waste them. What are you waiting for? Go. And that bowl of soup, hide it. It's too late, it's too late. The manager said anxiously and quickly turned around. In this short period of time, his face had already changed into a brilliant smile. He said, "This lowly official greets Princess Yongning and Lord Zhu." No need. Li Yi waved his hand and pointed at the person who was desperately hiding the cucumbers behind his back. He said, "You come here." It's over. Seeing this scene, the manager of the dining hall's heart was bleeding. These were the last 2 cucumbers. Consort Chen, this lowly official has let you down. The manager silently mourned for the 2 cucumbers. Consort Chen's cucumbers were gone, so be it. He couldn't defend this Lord Zhu. Of the people who could steal the eldest princess porridge and still stand here, Imperial Consort Chen was one, but that didn't include Consort Chen. Li didn't kill them all. He picked a fresh cucumber, washed it and broke it in half. He gave the front half to Yongning and nibbled on the rest as he pointed at the person in front of him and said, You, where are you looking? Right, I'm talking to you. Stop hiding, bring that eggplant, Kunlun purple melon over. Even Consort Yan's Kunlun purple melon had been destroyed. The manager of the dining hall's expression became even more bitter. The dining hall was responsible for the meals in the palace. Consorts without any status didn't have the power to order them around, much less foreign officials. Other than the imperial family, the only person who could treat the dining hall as his own kitchen was Li Yi. This was because he was not only the mathematics teacher of the many little princes and princesses, but he was also Princess Xianxia's cooking teacher and nutritionist in name. This was what the old emperor had said. As long as he didn't tear down the dining hall, the manager couldn't say anything about what he did here. As for complaining to the emperor that this Lord Zhou was arrogant and despotic, provoking the resentment of the people of the dining hall, and using public property for his own personal use. Not only did he steal Consort Chen's cucumber, he even stole Consort Yan's purple melon. This kind of behavior was simply not tolerated by the law and would anger both men and gods. The manager really didn't dare. According to Unique, the emperor had personally invited this Lord Zhou to a meal a few days ago. It was just him and the emperor. Who else in the world could have such an honor? Not even the prime minister. Even if he had 10 more guts, he still wouldn't dare to do this. Chapter 372. Li Yi didn't make egg-fried rice this time. The food in the palace was rich in ingredients, and many of them couldn't be found outside. It was a great waste of resources to only take some plain rice and 2 eggs. He carried Princess Yongning to a chair and let her sit quietly while he busied himself in front of the stove. In just half an hour, 2 bowls of steaming hot noodles were ready to be served. Some time ago he had obtained the secret recipe of his noodles from his aunt. After Li Yi's own modification, the ingredients used were richer while retaining the original taste. Looking at the 2 sitting on the stone table in the courtyard, the aroma wafting far away, the manager of the food bureau swallowed a mouthful of saliva. After taking a glance at the pot, he wanted to cry but had no tears. "You're eating noodles, at least leave some soup for me." The food in the palace should have been innovated long ago. Being able to make ordinary noodles so extraordinary, he might be able to gain the favor of those nobles. This was a great credit to him. Princess Yongning only lowered her head to eat and was still unwilling to talk. However, Li Yi understood that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. It was already a great improvement for her to reach out to him. It would be good to change slowly. If he acted too impatient and caused her disgust, all his previous efforts would be wasted. After the meal, Li Yi held Princess Yongning's hand and walked back to the original place. There were already a few eunuchs and palace maids waiting anxiously. "See you tomorrow." After handing her over to a palace maid, Li Yi turned around and waved his hand. Then he turned and walked in the direction of the palace gate. The little girl looked in the direction he left and didn't look away for a long time until his figure disappeared. Li Yi decided to teach them all the contents of the book in a short period of time and then let them slowly digest and learn by themselves. That way he would have enough time to do his own things. The number of lessons each month was set by the old emperor, but how to go about it and which 4 days to choose was up to Li Yi himself. He only needed to teach them everything that should be taught. When he walked out of the palace gate, Mississippi Lu was already waiting for him in the carriage. Li Yi didn't go home first. He planned to go to the crown prince's residence first. There was a need to inform him about the banquet that the king of Shu had invited. The gatekeeper of the crown prince's residence was very cordial to him. He told him that the crown prince had left early in the morning and should be returning soon. He asked him to wait for a while in the residence. When Mississippi Lu saw the guards of the prince's mansion flying around on the grassy slope at the back and having a great time, she lost all interest in drinking tea in her room. Li Yi sat in a hall and occasionally saw a shadow flitting across his sight. Actually, gliders could only allow people to experience the pleasure of flying. If they wanted to fly higher according to the current technology, they might not be able to build a human-powered plane. However, they could consider a hot air balloon. Zhou Xian was now studying air, levitation or aerodynamics. Any one of these subjects was enough to take him a lifetime. It was unimaginable for Li Yi. Fortunately, he could enjoy himself, so he just let him be. When he was halfway through his cup of tea, he didn't see Zhou Xian. Instead, a maidservant of the crown prince's residence appeared. "Excuse me, are you County Magistrate Li?" The maidservant walked in slowly and asked while blinking her eyes at Li Yi. Li Yi nodded and asked, "Has the crown prince returned?" The maidservant shook her head and said, "The crown prince hasn't returned yet." I'm under the orders of the Crown Prince's wife to invite County Magistrate Li over. What? The Crown Prince's wife? Li Yi was slightly startled when he heard the maidservant. The Crown Prince's wife invited him over? He was indeed familiar with Li Xian, but he had only seen the Crown Prince's wife a few times. They didn't even talk to each other. Why was she looking for him? However, since Li Xian wasn't here, the other party was the master of the Crown Prince's residence. Li Yi couldn't refuse, nor did he have any reason to refuse. He was led by the maidservant through 2 long corridors and finally arrived in front of a palace. Lord Zhu, please follow me, the maidservant said and walked in first. Crown Prince's wife, County Magistrate Li is here. The maidservant spoke respectfully to the figure behind the curtain before slowly retreating. Li Yi wasn't surprised by the curtain in front of him. The royal family and those big clans valued etiquette the most. A man and a woman alone in a room should avoid suspicion. Otherwise, when Li Xian came back and saw him with his Crown Prince's wife, he didn't know what he would think. Although he had said that he would give the Crown Prince's wife to him, he was drunk at that time and couldn't take it seriously. In an unfamiliar environment, Li Yi would always subconsciously look around. This was obviously not the Crown Prince's wife's boudoir. It was more like a study. There were 2 rows of bookshelves and there were some calligraphy and paintings hanging on the walls. At a glance, one could tell that they were the works of a woman. Li Yi could be considered an expert in these 2 fields. The calligraphy and paintings were new and probably not made for a long time. It was very likely that they were made by the Crown Prince's wife. When Li Xian was drunk at Prosperity Lane, he had said that the heir consort he was going to marry was a noble daughter of the Jing Kingdom. Not only was she extremely beautiful, but she was also well-educated and well-versed in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. From the looks of it now, it was not an exaggeration at all. It was a pity that he didn't agree to exchange with him at that time. I took the liberty of inviting Li Xianzi here. I hope you don't mind. Soon, a voice came from behind the curtain. The voice was very gentle. At first glance, one could tell that it was a well-educated and well-behaved girl from a humble family. She was the polar opposite of Mississippi Lu, who spoke with sword intent. Crown Prince's wife is too polite. Li Yi pretended that he didn't care and asked directly, "May I know why Crown Prince's wife asked me to come here?" In fact, Li Yi was not good at dealing with strangers, especially strange women, so he didn't beat around the bush. The other side didn't seem to expect that Li Yi would be so straightforward. After a moment of silence, she asked, "May I know when Li Xianzi and Crown Prince met?" Hearing this, Li Yi was stunned. Crown Prince's wife asked him to come here just to ask this question? After thinking for a while, he said, "It was only a few months. When you were in Qing'an Prefecture, right?" The voice came from behind the curtain again. "That's right." Li Yi nodded and said. He raised his head and looked into the curtain. He felt that the tone of Crown Prince's wife was strange. Why did she ask this question? Was she worried that he would steal her man? There was no need for that. From the beginning to the end, his sexual orientation was very normal. As for Li Xian, he didn't have a sexual orientation at all. Then how much does Li Xianzi know about Crown Prince? The voice from behind the curtain was still gentle. Li Yi finally realized what was so strange about it. As the Crown Prince's wife of Li Xian, how could she ask him how much he knew about Li Xian? He was not Uncle Li from downstairs. Li Xian slept in the same bed with her. Shouldn't she be the one who knew Li Xian the best? Could it be? Li Yi looked into the curtain again and suddenly thought of a possibility. That guy Li Xian couldn't still be. How could it be possible? They were married for a long time. How could there be a couple who hadn't consummated their marriage after a month? Even Lu Xiaohui couldn't do it unless the man had no sex. There seemed to be something wrong. Chapter 373. There should be no problem with Li Xian's sexual orientation. After all, there was a period of time when his dream was to be sought after by countless women in Qing'an Prefecture, and not by those talented men. But now his mind was filled with those strange things, and going to heaven had become his only dream. But why was this? How could a hedonistic son of the imperial family change so much in such a short period of time? What exactly happened to him? Was it his nature or was it someone else's intervention? Well, this was not important. Li Yi swore to the heavens that he had only inspired him a little. If he had known that he had the potential to become a scientist in his bones, Li Yi would not have committed such a sin no matter what. As the saying goes, it is better to destroy a temple than to destroy a marriage. To let a girl with impeccable family background, appearance and talent stay alone and become a living widow, this was much more serious than destroying a marriage. Just thinking about the word destroying a marriage made Li Yi shiver. He couldn't help but think of Miss Chen's hysterical voice. If he didn't like her, then he didn't like her. No matter how much virtue he accumulated or how many pagodas he built, it wouldn't be enough to atone for his crime. Li Xianxia. Seeing that there was no reply for a long time, the woman behind the curtain softly reminded him. Li Yi came back to his senses and said, Crown Prince is a good person. How much did he know about Li Xian? This was not a standard question. Should he answer very well, generally, or don't know? This Crown Prince's wife obviously didn't have any experience in dealing with strangers, otherwise she wouldn't have asked such a low standard question. Good person? Yes, Crown Prince is a good person. Li Yi nodded and said. Although using words like weirdo, stupid, and stupid to describe Li Xian might be more appropriate, he was in front of the Crown Prince's wife, so he had to at least give him some face. He had so many flaws that they were innumerable, but Li Xian was still worthy of being called a good person. Li Xianxia, can you give me more details? The voice behind the curtain sounded a little embarrassed. Li Yi sighed, thinking that this Miss Wang must not have had it easy, marrying someone she had never met before. Her married life must not have been very ruy. One had to know that Li Xian had expressed his opposition to this marriage a long time ago. He wanted to find a woman he liked and have a passionate relationship with her. It would be best if they could elope or something like that. Thus, no matter how outstanding the young miss of the Wang family was, she was not chosen by Li Xian himself. Naturally, he would shift his resistance to her. This was also the reason why Li Yi was here. She was in the best period of her life and was full of yearning for love, but reality poured cold water on her. She didn't want her life to go on like this. She wanted to change, but she didn't know how to change. The dignified Crown Prince's concubine was no different from an ordinary woman in this matter. At least half of the reason why things became like this was because of him. Li Yi thought for a moment and said, just as I said, Crown Prince is a good person. He does not have the arrogance of a member of the royal family, does not like to put on airs, likes to pretend to be an ordinary person and mingles with the lower class. He will definitely speak up when he sees injustice. He likes to drink, but his tolerance is very low. He will pass out after one glass of strong wine without water, likes to talk nonsense when drunk and has a lot to say during meals. He likes to go to brothels, only listens to songs and does not ask for girls. He also likes all kinds of novel or strange things. If you want to get along well with him, you must know that if two stones of different sizes fall from the same height, they will fall at the same time. You must also know that the ground under our feet is not flat but a ball. From the Crown Prince's residence, it will take us a long time to return to the starting point. Recently, Crown Prince has been studying problems related to the air. Just like what Crown Prince's wife saw, those guards fly in the sky with big kites on their backs. In a few days they might sit on a ball that can spit fire and fly even higher. In order to make up for his sins, Li Yi had exposed Li Xian's past. If it was not for the fact that he really did not know about it, he would have revealed whether or not Li Xian had a mole on his butt. Glancing at the woman behind the curtain who seemed to be extremely shocked, he sighed in his heart. Miss, I can only help you to this point. You have to walk the rest of the road by yourself. If it was not for the fact that he was worried that this noble lady's heart was too conservative and could not accept it, Li Yi even wanted to suggest that she directly drug Li Xian's food. Once the rice was cooked, he would not be able to deny it even if he wanted to. In fact, Crown Prince's wife was not that shocked. Crown Prince's husband was a strange person. She knew this from the first day she married into Crown Prince's residence. On the night of their wedding, she sat on the bed all night and he sat by the table all night. The two of them just sat like that, not drinking wine, not having the pleasure of the boudoir. None of the things that her mother taught her before she got married were used. Later, he slept in the study every night and never once stepped into the wedding room. He was very kind to her, very kind. The two of them were more like strangers than husband and wife. She could not walk into his world and he had never tried to get close to her. The two of them ate together, went out to the cold mountain temple to pray, but that was all they had in common. Before she got married, she had fantasized about what her future husband would be like. Would he be a courteous young man? Or a violent playboy from the royal family? Or perhaps he was just a mediocre crown prince. However, none of these were true. He was courteous and not a playboy at all. Of course, he was not mediocre either. He was highly regarded by the current emperor and was appointed as the supervisor of Gyeonggi province. His ability was equally outstanding, and he could actually make people soar in the sky like a bird. He was so outstanding. He and Gu Shiju were people from two completely different worlds. However, she was not reconciled to it. She had also longed for a Rui husband, just like her current husband. She also hoped that she and her husband could be like her parents. Since God would not directly grant her these things, she certainly had to strive for them through her own efforts. Seeing that there was no movement behind the curtain for a long time, Li Yi shook his head. He did not disturb her and slowly retreated from the room. Li Xian's imperial concubine was clearly a woman with her own ideas. This was something that everyone admired. Li Yi had tried his best to do what he could. He hoped that she could get what she wanted. Li Xian was the kind of person who could not be pulled back after he had made a decision. This was the most he could do. After all, things like entering the bridal chamber should be done by the couple themselves, and he could not help much. Li Xian had not returned yet, and Li Yi did not continue to wait. After leaving a letter, he dragged Mississippi Lu out of the prince's mansion. At the same time, a finished glider of the prince's mansion was also dragged away. The guards of Prince Ning's mansion could not keep something that Mississippi Lu wanted. Chapter 374. The King of Shu's Invitation? During dinner, Li Xian held a paper raft in his hand. He shook his head and murmured, "He's been targeted so quickly. As expected, no matter where he is, he'll be noticed in the shortest amount of time. Forget it, forget it. That guy is likely to be the future emperor, and he's very vengeful. It's not good to offend him." He casually put the paper raft aside, clearly not taking this matter to heart. Offending a prince who could ascend the throne was clearly not a wise decision for Li Yi. However, he himself was not worried. He and the King of Shu did not see eye to eye, but in the worst case he could just return to Qingyan Prefecture. The King of Shu would not make a move against a powerful prince over such a small matter. In the room, other than the servants standing to the left and right, there was only the crown prince and his consort eating at the table. Husband. When dinner was about to end, the crown prince's consort suddenly put down her jade chopsticks and looked up at Li Xian. "What's the matter?" Li Xian looked at her in confusion. Although they were husband and wife in name, the two of them did not speak much, especially during dinner. These days he had long gotten used to this kind of silence. "When I was tidying up the study today, I saw a document that my husband dropped. It said that 2 stones of different sizes fell from the same height and landed at the same time. Is that true?" The crown prince's consort looked at Li Xian with a faint expression of confusion. "Shouldn't the big stone fall first?" Hearing this, Li Xian was startled. It seemed that he did not expect the crown prince's consort to ask him this question. It turned out that she was not only interested in calligraphy and painting. Other than the 4 arts, Li Xian suddenly discovered another side of the crown prince's consort. Inexplicably, his mood improved. He put down his chopsticks and stood up. Practice is the only way to test the truth. As for what the truth of the matter is, we'll know by doing an experiment. Walking out of the door, he waved at a guard not far away and said, "Lu Liang, come over here. Pick up 2 stones and climb up to the roof." The guards of the crown prince's residence were already familiar with this kind of thing. Throwing stones, leaves, silver, and what kind of effect would satisfy the crown prince? This was a piece of cake for them. How could this be? Seeing the 2 stones fall to the ground at the same time, the crown prince's consort revealed a look of perfect disbelief. Li Xian held her hand and only let go after bringing her to the spot where the stone landed. He explained with a smile, "Actually, the size of the stone has nothing to do with its size. However, if it's a stone or a leaf, the result will be different. This means that our surroundings are filled with something that I call air." Seeing the crown princess looking at him with admiration, Li Xian only felt very carefree in his heart. Other than Li Yi, there was actually someone else who was interested in what he did. No, Li Yi had never been interested in what he was doing. He was an omniscient pervert. It was hard to find a confidant in one's life. Zhou Xian, who was in an extremely excited state, naturally did not notice the faint smile on the crown prince's consort's face. How could those guards fly on a kite? Zhou Xian furrowed his brows. He was aware of the situation, but he didn't know why. He scratched his head and said, "This problem is rather complicated. I only have some ideas. Let's go to the study room and talk about it." Hey. Take it easy. If you break your leg or something, I don't want to take care of you for the rest of your life. Mississippi Lu found a new toy. A low slope behind the Viscount's residence became her private territory. Li Yi stood at the top of the slope and watched speechlessly as she tirelessly repeated the climbing and gliding movements over and over again. He thought to himself that the height of this thing was not even as high as her own Qinggong. How old was she already, and yet she was still playing such childish games? Rui said with a smile, "Don't worry, husband. It's not high here. Even if she really falls from above, it's okay." Xiao Huan enviously watched second Miss flying around in the sky like a bird. She wanted to try it, but she could not make up her mind. She was afraid of being high up. The roof was already the highest place she could accept. Since a few days ago the weather had begun to warm up. Today the sun was shining brightly. It was not suitable to stay at home. Of course, it was not suitable to go to the palace to teach. It was definitely a good choice for a family outing. Li Yi decided to ignore Mississippi Lu and concentrate on his barbecue business. When he came back from the palace yesterday, he patrolled the food bureau as usual and gained a lot. 2 eggplants and some rare fresh green vegetables. At that time, the manager's face also seemed to turn green. This was not very important. After watching Mississippi Lu fly the kite for a while, the little fatty and Duanwu ran over and watched Li Yi barbecue without blinking. The former swallowed a lot of saliva. The 2 old madams were basking in the sun and talking under the grassy slope. There were guards of the 2 families around them. In fact, there was nothing to be vigilant about. Within a radius of 10 miles of this manor, the Viscount's mansion was the only supreme existence. There would be no blind guy making trouble around the Viscount's mansion. Rui came over and helped him stir the charcoal fire. She said, "Husband, remember to let Rui go with you when you go to the banquet at the King of Shu's mansion tonight." Ever since the incident with the crazy monk, everyone began to pay more attention to his safety. The old madam even transferred the head guard of the Li mansion here. Of course, with Rui there, it did not make much difference whether there were guards or not. However, Rui could stay at home and could not always follow him when he went out. It was fine when Fong was there, but now that Fong had returned to Qing and mansion to take care of the family moving to the capital, there was only Mississippi Lu by his side. Li Yi nodded. He would not joke about his own safety. For the time being, he could only let Mississippi Lu follow him. When Fong and the others arrived, things would be much easier. Although the capital was good, it was not as convenient as when he was in Qingyan mansion. Many times when he encountered something, there was no one around him who could be used. At the same time, he also lacked a key sense of control, which made him resist the capital in his heart. Okay, it's almost done, right? The aroma hit his nose, and the little fatty almost couldn't hold back his saliva. Li Yi pushed away the fat hand he reached over and said, "If it's not cooked, you will have diarrhea. Go play in the side and I'll call you when it's done." The little fatty and Duanwu went to observe Mississippi Lu again. Li Yi tilted his head and asked Rui, "What do you think of what I said last night?" Rui smiled and said, "Wherever husband goes, I will naturally go." Li Yi nodded and said, "That's good. During this time, I will take care of the matters in the palace as soon as possible. When the weather gets warmer, we will leave." Not far from the 2 of them, the little girl, who seemed to be paying attention to the second miss, scratched her head in confusion. Why did the young miss and the son-in-law never tell her where they were going? Could it be that they were eloping? Thinking of a terrible possibility, she immediately became nervous. Chapter 375. Tonight was the day of the King of Shu's banquet. Li Yi only intended to go through the motions and not embarrass the king. Therefore he did not need to prepare much. In the afternoon he was still preparing for his lessons in his room. If he wanted to return to Qingyan Prefecture as soon as possible, he had to get rid of those little troubles as soon as possible. However, he could not simply fool those little princes and princesses. That was equivalent to lying to the emperor. Li Yi could only work hard to be a dutiful teacher. Son-in-law, the clothes are on the bed. Xiao Huan walked in from outside and placed a stack of clothes at the head of Li Yi's bed. Although she was still Rui's personal maidservant in this household, she was actually the same as the master. She did not need to do such menial work. However, when it involved Li Yi or Rui, she would do it herself and never let other maidservants interfere. After placing the folded clothes on the head of Li Yi's bed, she did not leave. With her hands behind her back, she walked with small steps to Li Yi's side and looked at the table. She thought to herself, what is the son-in-law writing? Is it a farewell letter to me and second miss? Is the son-in-law really going to elope with second miss and abandon them? What are you looking at? Li Yi turned to look at her and asked curiously. Since the morning, the little maidservant's actions had become somewhat strange. She clearly did not know a few words, but she still pretended to look at what he was writing. In the past she would never be like this. No, no. Xiao Huan shook her head like a rattle drum and immediately ran out of the room. Li Yi looked at her with some inexplicable confusion. He found that it was getting late and it was time to go to the King of Shu's banquet. Although the King of Shu was not the legitimate son, he was the eldest son of the current emperor. A few years ago he moved out of the palace. Unlike the other princes, the King of Shu did not go to his own fief but stayed in the capital. Not only that, the King of Shu's mansion was also widely accepted. Usually the guests were not children of high officials or noble families. All the young talents were proud to make friends with the King of Shu. Of course, the King of Shu was also a dragon among men. He was well versed in both literature and martial arts and had a very high reputation in the capital. For an ordinary prince, it was a taboo to not obediently stay in his own fief and instead spread his wings in the capital. Now the King of Shu was still His Majesty's world. Was a prince trying to rebel? However, the King of Shu was not an ordinary prince. He was the first prince, born of noble concubine Cui. In the absence of the Empress's legitimate son, the King of Shu was the only candidate to enter the East Palace, according to the royal family's principle of choosing the eldest son over the concubine. Countless people believed that the King of Shu would be the future crown prince and the next monarch of the Jing kingdom. Therefore, even the censorate turned a blind eye to his actions. In addition, the Cui family behind concubine Cui added fuel to the fire, causing the King of Shu's reputation to be unparalleled. Other than the fact that he still lacked the emperor's personal edict, he was no different from the crown prince. This was also the reason why Li Yi did not refuse the King of Shu's invitation. Although he felt helpless, he had to admit that he could not afford to offend the King of Shu. If the future emperor of the Jing kingdom bore a grudge against him, there would be no place for him in Qing and prefecture or even the entire Jing kingdom, let alone the capital. It was easy to imagine what he would have to live in the future. Could it be that he really had to bring his entire family far away from the Jing kingdom and live a miserable life? It was not easy to live in this damn feudal society. He cursed in his heart, took 2 steps forward and handed the invitation to the servant of the King of Shu's mansion. It's Li Xianxia. Welcome, welcome. The servant of the King of Shu's mansion had a signature smile on his face. When facing Li Yi, there was no expression of respect on his face at all. This was normal. He did not know how many marquises he had received. There were at least 80 if not 100 marquises in the capital. If he was not a guest of His Highness, he would not even look at him. Young Duke Qin, come in, come in. Not far from Li Yi, another servant invited a young man into the mansion with a face full of smiles. The servant behind the young man handed a brocade box to the servant and said, "This is the authentic work of Duke Sui. I know that your highness likes Duke Sui's calligraphy, so I spent a lot of effort to find it." Hearing the 2 words Duke Sui, Li Yi was slightly absent-minded for a moment. He only knew that Duke Sui was a calligraphy grandmaster in the Jing kingdom and seemed to have a high status in the imperial court. During Madame Dowager's birthday banquet, Yan Zhang and the man named Wuxia had mentioned him. County Magistrate Li? Suddenly he heard the servant's voice. Li Yi came to his senses and turned to look at him. He asked, "Is there anything else?" The servant looked at him and asked tentatively, "Your greeting?" "Greeting?" Li Yi turned around and exchanged a glance with second Miss Lu. When the King of Shu sent someone to deliver the invitation to him, he never mentioned anything about paying respects to the emperor. Who knew that there was such a rule in the capital that guests had to bring gifts? Li Yi looked at the servant and asked, "If I don't pay my respects, can I not enter?" He thought that if this was the case, it would be a good reason for him to go home. "No, there is no such rule." The servant was stunned for a moment, then immediately shook his head and said, there was no rule that one could not visit the King of Shu's mansion without greeting. However, everyone was a person of high status. It was the most basic etiquette to prepare a small gift when visiting. It was also a sign of respect for the King of Shu. After all, you are a viscount. Do you have to be so stingy? County magistrate, please. The servant thought so in his heart, but he could not say it out loud. He could only helplessly make an inviting gesture. He knew that the King of Shu wouldn't care if he paid his respects or not, but as a guest, how could he be so insensible? At this time, Li Yi had already noticed that except for him, everyone who entered the king's mansion would bring gifts. It seemed that there was such a rule in the capital. This was a good practice. When he made more friends in the future, he did not need to do business. He could just hold banquets at home every day. He was sure that he would receive so many gifts that his hands would cramp. Then he could sell them and earn money. Fortunately, he did not know this rule. He did not plan to invite the King of Shu in the future. If he could not take back his gifts, he might as well not give them. He shook his head and stepped into the mansion. As his personal female bodyguard, Mississippi Lu naturally had to follow him. "Miss, wait." The servant hurriedly reached out to stop her. "Why? Only one person can enter with one greeting card?" Li Yi turned his head and asked with a frown. No. The servant hurriedly shook his head. He pointed to the sword in Lu Rui's hand and said, "Since it was brought by County Magistrate Li, of course you can enter. However, you are not allowed to bring weapons into the mansion. You need to leave this sword here and take it with you when you leave." The King of Shu was a very important person. If something happened to him, no one related to him would be able to escape. Of course, this included all the servants in the mansion. Although the strict rules in the mansion were not as strict as those in the palace, there was a strict rule. Except for the guards in the mansion, no one was allowed to bring weapons into the mansion. Of course, such a long sword could not be brought in. Mississippi Lu's sword was almost always with her. Once, Li Yi could not find a suitable weapon to kill fish. He stole Mississippi Lu's sword when she was not paying attention. As a result, he was chased by her for half a day. His buttocks were swollen and he could not get out of bed for 2 days. Could be seen how much she treasured this sword. He thought that she would refuse. Unexpectedly, she only glanced at the servant indifferently and placed the sword on the table behind her. "Watch it carefully," Li Yi reminded the servant. The servant smiled and nodded. However, in his heart he despised the sword. What was there to be careful of with such a broken sword? Any sword in the mansion was many times better than this. He raised his head and looked at Li Yi. He was extremely suspicious. Why would the prince invite such a country bumpkin? Chapter 376. A small viscount was not worthy of the servants of the King of Shu's mansion to treat him with respect, let alone a country bumpkin viscount. A servant led him to a large pavilion and placed him in a relatively remote corner. The interior of the building was brightly lit. From time to time, people would enter and leave, and the surroundings were filled with noises. On the table in front of him were all sorts of fruits, vegetables, and pastries. The drinks were of high quality and the standard was not low. From this, it could be seen that the King of Shu was also a man of taste. There were rows of tables on both sides. At this time, some of the tables were already occupied and some acquaintances were gathered together, laughing and chatting loudly. More than 10 dancers were dancing on the red carpet in the center. Their ankles were bare and their clothes were revealing. As they danced, a piece of smooth skin would often be exposed. If he didn't know that this was the King of Shu's mansion, Li Yi might have thought that this was a place like the Myriad Fragrance Pavilion or the Jade Courtyard. The dancers danced so coquettishly that many people stared at them, as if their souls had been hooked. "Is it beautiful?" Just as Li Yi was engrossed in watching, a faint voice came from beside him. "Beautiful." Li Yi nodded. As soon as he said this word, he immediately realized something. He changed his tone and said with a serious expression, "Beautiful my ass. This is not a dance. It's obviously coquettish. It's an insult to the culture. I didn't expect the King of Shu to be such a person. It's really disappointing." Li Yi deeply condemned the hypocritical behavior of the king of Shu. He moved his eyes away from the dancer's enchanting figures and focused on drinking a pot of grape wine in front of him. As he raised his glass, he stole a glance at the scene. The king of Shu was also a person who knew how to enjoy this figure, this waist, this flexibility. Even without looking at their faces, he could give these dancers a superb evaluation. This occasion was actually not suitable for Mississippi Lu. There was no other woman here except her. In this era, there were not many entertainment activities. It was normal for a group of men to gather together to watch an erotic dance. If not for the special status of the king of Shu inviting this group of people to a banquet in a brothel, the atmosphere would definitely be more harmonious. Of course, Li Yi didn't have dirty thoughts like most people. He was purely appreciating art. Unfortunately, Mississippi Lu's artistic attainment was still far from his. She only saw their flirtatious and explicit side, but didn't understand the essence of the dancer's dance. How dare you? How dare you talk about the king of Shu behind his back? Although Li Yi had deliberately lowered his voice when he spoke just now, it was still heard by someone at the neighboring table. A well-dressed young man with a scholarly aura stood up from his seat and loudly reprimanded him. Li Yi didn't expect him to have such a big reaction. He didn't have much interaction with the king of Shu, so there was no grudge between them. What he said just now was just a joke. But looking at the young man's reaction, it was as if he had insulted his ancestors. Li Yi raised his head, looked at him and said, "It was just a joke. Why do you take it so seriously?" The young man snorted and said, "How can you joke about the king of Shu's status?" Li Yi frowned. There was no enmity between the two of them. It was a little too much for the young man to latch onto his unintentional words. Even if he wanted to curry favor with the king of Shu, he didn't have to use such a method, right? This kind of person couldn't be bothered with. The more he was bothered, the more excited he would be. Li Yi could pack up and go home after he was done today. He didn't even stand up and turned his head to continue admiring the art. The young man opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to continue the words he had prepared. Of course, it had nothing to do with him if someone spoke rudely to the king of Shu. But if he didn't do something special tonight, how could he get the attention of the king of Shu? Everyone knew that the king of Shu was the most promising one among all the princes to ascend to the throne. For them, getting close to the king of Shu and befriending him was undoubtedly a shortcut to the peak of life. However, there were many people who had the same idea as him, including many high-ranking officials and dignitaries. He could only write a few good poems. In the end, he was just a commoner. If he wanted to stand out, he naturally had to do something different. When someone spoke rudely to the king of Shu, he had to stand up and reprimand him righteously, expressing his endless admiration for the king of Shu. Even if he could win a little favor from the king of Shu, it would be enough. Of course, he was selective. He couldn't afford to offend the person who was respectfully invited by the steward of the prince's mansion. But the person who was brought here with a look of disdain by the servants of the prince's mansion and sat in a more remote place than him was, of course, the best choice. The young man in front of him, who looked unfamiliar and obviously didn't have a strong background, was a very good breakthrough. He had already predicted what would happen next. He was just waiting for the servants of the prince's mansion to chase the guy who spoke rudely to the king of Shu out so that he could show his face a little. But he didn't expect that the other party would be so cowardly, making all his preparations go up in smoke. If he continued to pester him, he was afraid that he would be chased out by the steward of the prince's mansion as a troublemaker. Helplessly, the young man glanced at Li Yi and could only sit back down. "Is the king of Shu very famous?" Mississippi Lu grabbed the wine pot from Li Yi's hand and poured herself a glass of grape wine. She looked around with her beautiful eyes. Even though she was not familiar with the princesses and kings of the royal family, she didn't think that an ordinary prince could handle such a scene. Not only is he famous, he is the prince who is most likely to become the emperor in the future. How can he not be famous? Li Yi said lazily. Lu Rui pursed her lips and said, "Is it good to be the emperor?" Most of the time Mississippi Lu was cold, but she was also quite cute when she was playful. Li Yi glanced at her and said in a low voice, "Of course it's good to be the emperor. Who doesn't want to be the emperor? He has the final say in such a big country. He can decide the life and death of people with one word, and he can decide the fate of countless people with one thought." More importantly, after becoming the emperor, he can marry many concubines. He can have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, 72 concubines, and 3,000 beauties in the harem. Li Yi glanced at Mississippi Lu and saw her unkind eyes. He said righteously, "So, there is really nothing good about being the emperor. The main thing is that the body can't take it. If you don't believe me, think about it. Which emperor in history has lived a long life?" Li Yi used facts to prove why being the emperor was not good at all. If one wanted to live a long life, he had to give up the emperor's position as soon as possible. The right way was to consolidate his foundation and strengthen his body and kidneys. At some point, the noisy crowd suddenly became quiet and people began to rush to the door. Li Yi turned his head and saw a few figures, led by the king of Shu, walking in from outside. The main character had arrived. In order to show respect to the king of Shu, most people stood up from their seats and went forward to welcome him, regardless of their status. Li Yi and Mississippi Lu's seats were in the most remote corner of the hall. The young man beside him had already gone forward to welcome them. Looking at the king of Shu, who was surrounded by many people, Li Yi made the wise decision to sit here. The crowd quickly dispersed and the king of Shu walked forward, surrounded by the crowd. Li Yi glanced at him inadvertently and saw a figure behind the king of Shu that surprised him. Why is he here too? Seeing the slightly familiar face, Li Yi murmured in surprise. Cui Yanxin, a former jinshi. When he made things difficult for Wan Ruoqing in Prince Ning's mansion, he had a conflict with him. He didn't know what happened after that. He didn't expect to see him on such an occasion. Wait a minute. The king of Shu's mother is concubine Cui. The Cui family's sphere of influence is in Lin city of Qing in prefecture. Cui Yanxin's surname is also Cui. Obviously, he is the king of Shu's follower now. Is there any connection between these two? Chapter 377. As the saying goes, enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Now that they had bumped into each other, the atmosphere was a little awkward. Fortunately, the corner where Li Yi and Rui were at was remote and secluded enough. Cui Yanxin's attention seemed to be on the king of Shu and did not see him. She shifted her gaze away from Cui Yanxin's body. Suddenly, she felt as if someone's gaze had landed on her. Li Yi looked up and saw a familiar face diagonally in front of him. If he remembered correctly, that scholarly young man's name was Qin Liqing, a member of Duke Chen's estate. Just a few days ago, under the plum tree in the Cold Mountain Temple, Qin Liqing had argued with him. In the end, Li Xian's bodyguards had broken the legs of the servants in his clan. Speaking of which, the conflict between the two of them was not small. It was a mistake to attend the king of Shu's banquet tonight. He only had a few enemies in the capital, but he had met almost all of them. The king of Shu stood in front of the crowd with a cup of wine in his hand and said, "Thank you for giving I face and attending the banquet in my mansion. I will drink the first cup of wine as a sign of respect." Of course, this sentence was out of politeness. Among all the young talents in the capital except for Li Xian, who dared not to give face to the king of Shu, no one would be willing to offend the future emperor. Due to their status, their clans might not have official dealings with the king of Shu, but the relationship between the younger generation had always been more ambiguous. On this point, regardless of whether one was a staunch supporter of the king of Shu, the decisions made were generally the same. There was nothing wrong with befriending the king of Shu. They had to leave a way out for their families. After the king of Shu drank a cup of wine, the atmosphere in the banquet became lively. Eating, drinking, and having fun were the main theme of the banquet. Some people took this opportunity to connect with old friends, while others talked in low voices with the king of Shu. They were full of smiles and their eyes were full of lust. The king of Shu listened and nodded his head repeatedly. It was unknown what kind of shady deals they had secretly made. The dancers had already retreated, leaving behind a group of men who were whispering to each other. Those who were in the know would have thought that this was the banquet of the king of Shu, while those who didn't would have thought that they had come to a large-scale gay dating party. Li Yi, on the other hand, was different. Although Mississippi Lu was not very willing to talk, it was impossible for them to be intimate. However, she was still beautiful. Glancing at her would inexplicably improve his mood, wouldn't it? Li Yi was in a good mood, but some people were in a bad mood. Cui Yanxin was one of them. As a new jinshi and a descendant of the Cui family, Although he was only a member of a branch family under the influence of the Cui family, he could seek a better job and work hard for a few years. Although he might not have a bright future, it would be much better than his current situation of waiting at home. Wasn't it because in Ning Wang Fu he had belittled a lowly performer? A new Jinsher, how did he end up like this? Of course Cui Yanqi knew why he ended up like this. He didn't dare to hate Ning Wang, the Ministry of Personnel, and of course he didn't dare to hate the current emperor. He only hated the detestable Anxi County magistrate, who had stood up for the lowly performer, causing him to lose face that night. Even now, the hat of expressing sorrow because of a new poem was firmly pinned on his head, becoming a lifetime of shame. If he didn't take revenge, he wouldn't be a gentleman, but not now. Cui Yanqing clenched his teeth. What he had to do now was to closely follow the king of Shu and do his best to gain the prince's attention. When the prince ascended to the throne in the future, he would definitely not mistreat him. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge 10 years later. Moreover, everyone knew that the emperor's physical condition would definitely not last another 10 years. At that time he would definitely pay back the humiliation he had suffered 100-fold. Greetings, young Master Cui. Cui Yanqing raised his wine cup and repeatedly toasted the people around him. They were more or less related to the Cui family and were also close to the king of Shu. Naturally, his status had also risen. From a certain perspective, the incident at Ning Wang Fu was not completely without benefits for him. Tonight, the people at the king of Shu Wang Fu were the true upper-class people in the capital. If he could befriend one more person, he would have one more way out in the future. Cui Yanqing's gaze swept across the hall. Suddenly, his body stiffened and a look of disbelief appeared on his face. It's him. How could it be? Impossible. How could he be here? Cui Yanqing shook his head fiercely and chased that unrealistic thought out of his mind. That detestable fellow was the Anxi County magistrate. He should be in Qing'an Prefecture now. How could he appear in the capital and at the king of Shu's banquet? His hatred for him must be too strong, causing him to hallucinate. Cui Yanqing gulped down a mouthful of wine and swept his gaze across the crowd again. That detestable face once again appeared in his line of sight. Pfft! He spat out all the wine that he had not swallowed in time. One of the people who passed by Cui Yanqing was lucky enough to enjoy a wine bath. He wiped his face, but before he could show his anger, he saw that the person opposite him was even angrier than him. The person strode towards the corner with large strides. What are you looking at? No matter how calm she was, she could not stand being stared at for so long. Rui turned back and glared fiercely at Li Yi. Stingy. It's not like I'll lose a piece of flesh if I stare a few more times. Li Yi pursed his lips. Mississippi Lu was usually cold and gave off a mature and aloof feeling. However, she was only 17 years old. Her face was so tender and full of collagen. When he looked closely at her, he could see the tenderness under her cold exterior. He was a little curious. Logically speaking, two people who grew up in the same environment should not have such a big difference in their personalities. Rui was gentle and Wanru was gentle, while Mississippi Lu was like a tigress. How did they develop such a tigress? Out of curiosity, he had wanted to interview her. However, after careful consideration, he gave up on the idea. If she knew that he had compared her to a tigress, Li Yi could not guarantee that he would be able to return home in one piece. Why are you here? At this moment, a voice full of suppressed anger came from the front. Li Yi turned his head and saw Cui Yanqing, who was gnashing his teeth. It was his own embarrassment. Li Yi looked up at him and asked, "Why can't I be here?" He felt depressed in his heart. The reason why he had a conflict with Cui Yanqing was because Cui Yanqing had bullied his friend in front of him. Cui Yanqing had copied the poem and slapped his face because he had forced him to. Why was he still biting him? People often said that meeting an old friend in a foreign land should be one of the 4 happy events in life. Even if he did not put this matter on the same level as the wedding night, he should not be so unfriendly as soon as they met, right? Although Cui Yanqing was only a small official in the king of Shu's residence, who was the king of Shu, no one dared to look down on the people around him, who knew that he would become a high-ranking official in the court in 2 years. Therefore, his every move attracted the attention of many people present. The young scholar sitting beside Li Yi was slightly startled when he saw this. Then joy appeared on his face. He knew that his opportunity had come. He stood up from his seat and pointed at Li Yi. Yes, Someone like him who does not respect the king of Shu has no right to sit here. Cui Yanqing looked at him. The young man immediately said, adding oil to the fire, "Sir, you may not know, but just now." Li Yi rubbed the space between his eyebrows. The king of Shu really did not reject talented people. Take the person beside him for example. If he was a storyteller in a brothel, he would definitely have a much better future than studying. He quietly watched the young man's spittle fly. Cui Yanqing's face was gloomy. Occasionally he would look at him with eyes that seemed to be spewing fire. Several people around them had already noticed the strange situation and looked over with puzzled eyes. Chapter 378. Is that young Master Cui? Cui Yanqing was a member of the King of Shu's mansion. His actions usually represented the attitude of the King of Shu. Seeing his angry expression, the surrounding people cast curious looks at him. Young Master Cui seems to be very angry. What happened just now? I don't know. But that person looks a little strange. I've never seen him before. I didn't expect him to be qualified to attend His Highness's banquet. It seems that he and Cui Yanqing have a big grudge. But they happened to meet here. He can only blame his bad luck. The King of Shu had a wide range of friends. Whether they were high officials or poor disciples, as long as they had a certain characteristic that caught the eye of His Highness, they could become guests of the King of Shu's mansion. However, in the end there were still differences in status among the guests. Having the qualifications to attend the banquet did not mean that His Highness valued him. At least this young man who had offended Cui Yanqing had unfortunately bumped into the tip of the knife this time. While listening to the young man's spittle describing how disrespectful Li Yi was to the King of Shu, Cui Yanqing gradually calmed down. He had been so agitated just now because of his strong resentment against him. But he was very clear that this was the King of Shu's mansion. Even if he was a person of His Highness, he could not act without scruples. If Li Yi was really a guest that the King of Shu valued, he naturally could not let him do anything that would displease His Highness, although the possibility was very small. The scholar sitting at the table next to Li Yi said with a righteous expression, "What kind of status does Her Highness have? How can he insult her? In my opinion, such a person is not fit to sit here with all of you." This place could be considered as a secluded area in the hall, so naturally the guests were not very important. At this moment, when they heard the scholar's description, they only felt that this young man was too pedantic. Even visiting a brothel was an elegant thing for them, so what if there were a few scantily clad dancers? What did they count for? However, there were a few people who were quite disdainful of this scholar's behavior. He was a typical bootlicker who wanted to raise himself and gain His Highness's attention. He was even worse than the young man who spoke without thinking. Without waiting for Cui Yanqing to speak, a steward beside him frowned and said, "The King of Shu's residence does not welcome people who disrespect His Highness. While His Highness does not know about this, you should leave on your own." Cui Yanqing raised his eyebrows but did not stop him. According to the King of Shu's character, he would not fly into a rage just because of a few rude words. At most he would just chase him out. Since the outcome would be the same no matter what, there was no point in him interfering. After all, he had only been by Her Highness' side for a short period of time. If he did too much, Her Highness would be displeased. However, he already knew that the other party was in the capital. The grudges between the two of them could be slowly settled in the future. The way things had developed was obviously out of Rui's expectations. Li Yi's words to change the topic had been misinterpreted by the other party. She did not know what Li Yi was thinking, but he had just said that the King of Shu was not an ordinary person. He was the future emperor of the Jing kingdom and could not be offended. If he could befriend the King of Shu, it would be of great benefit to him in the future. Otherwise, with his lazy character, why would he attend this kind of banquet? Lu Rui frowned slightly. She wanted to step forward to explain. This was an extremely rare occurrence for her to begin with. If she was the only one who encountered such a thing, she would have left in anger. At this moment, Li Yi stood up and patted her shoulder saying, "Let's go." His tone was very calm and there was no expression of annoyance or indignation on his face. It was as if he was doing something that could not be more ordinary. Lu Rui looked at him and then coldly looked around before following him out. "If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? Trouble comes from the mouth. In a place like this, you should be careful with your words. That girl is a rare beauty. It would be a pity if we could get to know her. The guests at the nearby tables shook their heads and discussed for a while. They did not take it to heart. They only thought that they had to be careful with their words in the King of Shu's mansion. If they were chased out like him, it would be very embarrassing. After such a thing happened, it would be difficult for the young man to raise his head in the capital in the future. This was just a small interlude and did not spread to more places. Everyone's attention quickly shifted to other places. The young scholar's face was filled with excitement. He felt that he had done something amazing. The only regret was that the person had actually left just like that. If he had defended himself and refused to admit it, wouldn't it have been perfect if the King of Shu was alerted? Cui Yanxin looked in the direction of the door and a cold smile appeared on his lips. He had only humiliated him once, which was far less than the humiliation he had brought to himself. There was still a long way to go. He did not mind settling the score slowly. This remote corner near the gate would not be valued by the King of Shu, nor would it be valued by the real bigwigs. The closer the seat was to the front, the more respected it was. It was also the focus of everyone's attention. How is old master doing recently? Li Xian, the King of Shu, smiled and asked a young man of the same age beside him. The young man smiled and said, "Your Highness, thank you for your concern. Grandpa has always been healthy." The King of Shu said, "Marquis Qin has made great contributions to the Jing kingdom. With the blessing of the country you will definitely live a long life." There was not much courtesy between the young man and the King of Shu. The Qin family had always been on the side of the King of Shu and they had known each other since childhood. He looked at the other person opposite him and said, "I didn't know that Qinyu had come to the capital city until today. Why didn't you inform me before?" Cui Qinyu smiled and said, "I just arrived the day before yesterday. I have been busy with other affairs these days and didn't even have time to visit the King of Shu's mansion." After saying this, he raised the wine cup in front of him and said, "I will punish myself with a cup first." "1 cup is not enough. At least 3 cups. Another laughter came from the side and filled Cui Qinyu's cup again. "After so many years, Qinyu, you still haven't changed your bad habit." Cui Qinyu looked at the man and shook his head. He drank up the wine in his cup again. The 4 of them were chatting and laughing casually, but the people at the surrounding tables were not so relaxed. The reason was that apart from the King of Shu, the other 3 people were also very extraordinary. Qin Lijun, the eldest grandson of Marquis Qin, Cui Qinyu, the eldest grandson of the Cui family, and Qinyu, the only male heir of Marquis Qin. Any of their families could shake the whole capital city with a stomp of their feet. Chapter 379. "I'll introduce someone to you later," the King of Shu suddenly said after the 4 of them chatted for a while. Although he was a prince, he did not put on any airs in front of these 3 people. Firstly, it was because they had grown up together and had a good personal relationship. Secondly, it was because the 3 of them had strong backgrounds and were his strong supporters. Naturally, he treated them differently from others. "Oh, who is it?" Cui Qiyu was slightly surprised when he heard that. The person who could make the King of Shu introduce the 3 of them so seriously was naturally not a simple person. Otherwise, he would not have mentioned him in front of them. Qin Lijun's face also showed an expression of interest. Only the young man named Qinyu was minding his own business and did not seem to be interested. "A very capable person," the King of Shu said with a smile. The King of Shu had been gathering talents from all over the world. Naturally, he would not let go of the son of Chong and County who was valued by his father. As early as 3 days ago he had sent someone to send an invitation. However, he had to meet the 3 more important people today, so he did not look for him immediately. As for whether the son of Chong and County would attend the banquet, it was not within the King of Shu's consideration. He had not considered that possibility at all. Because the King of Shu kept them guessing, Cui Qingyu and Qin Lijun became even more interested in the person he was talking about. "Go and invite the son of Chong and County over." The King of Shu waved to a servant behind him and said. When the servant heard this, he respectfully responded and immediately left. "The son of Chong and County?" Cui Qiyu was slightly stunned when he heard that. It was his first time in the capital and he was very unfamiliar with this name. When he first heard this name, Qin Lijun was stunned. After thinking for a while, he quickly had an impression. He frowned slightly and murmured, "It's actually him?" The king of Shu looked at him and asked doubtfully, "Li Jun knows him? Does he know him?" Qin Li Jun nodded and said, "If there is no second son of Chong and County in the capital and the son of Chong and County that your highness mentioned also has the surname Li, then it should be him." Seeing him frown, the king of Shu paused for a moment before asking, "The county magistrate of Chong, and is indeed surnamed Li Jun. Could it be that you have a grudge against him?" The Duke of Qin was his staunch ally, and the county magistrate of Chong, and Li was a talent that he wanted to win over with all his might. Although the latter couldn't be of much help to him in his quest for the throne, there must be a reason why his imperial father valued him so much. Since he was useful to his imperial father, then he would definitely be useful to him as well. Moreover, he was eager to know what exactly was the divine punishment that allowed the Jing kingdom to defeat the Qi kingdom even though it was weak. Therefore, the king of Shu did not want to see any conflict between the two of them. Qin Li Jun shook his head and said, "That's not it. I've never met him before and there's no enmity between us." After saying this, he changed the topic and said, "However, the Li family and my Qin family have a long-standing grudge. The son of Chong and County is the eldest grandson of the Li family. It is not wrong to say that he has a grudge against him." This time it was the king of Shu's turn to frown. If there was a personal grudge between Qin Li Jun and Li Yi, he could mediate between them. There would always be a way to satisfy both of them. As long as there was no deep hatred between the two, the king of Shu would be able to let it go. And if there was a deep hatred between them, the county magistrate of Chong and would not have survived until now, based on Qin Li Jun's character and background. What he did not expect was that this matter actually involved the house of Duke Qin. Even though he was the king of Shu, he could not completely ignore the feelings of the house of Duke Qin. Seeing the king of Shu frown, Qin Li Jun smiled and said, "Your Highness, you don't have to take it to heart. After all, you have to focus on the overall situation. The grudge between our family and the Li family is just a small matter. It must not affect your Highness's important matters." Qin Li Jun was naturally aware of what had happened to the Qin family recently. The emperor's attitude towards the county magistrate of Chong and was unclear. The Qin family would not anger the emperor because of a personal grudge. Although the Qin family would not do anything to him, it was hard for Qin Li Jun to have a good impression of the county magistrate of Chang'an. However, to his surprise, the king of Shu seemed to think highly of this person. With this additional link, the Qin family had to let go of the old grudge. The king of Shu nodded but did not say anything else. At this time he did not know much about the county magistrate of Chang'an. If the county magistrate of Chang'an was really capable, he had to mediate between the Qin family and the county magistrate no matter what. If Li Yi was just an undeserved reputation, he naturally would not interfere in this matter. In times of need, he would even stand on the Qin family's side. For them, there were no eternal friends or enemies. There were only eternal interests. As long as the interests were enough, enemies could also become friends. The king of Shu himself understood this principle, and so did the Qin family. At this moment, the servant who had just left came back. However, the expression on his face was a little hesitant, as if he wanted to say something. "What happened? Where is the county magistrate of Chang'an?" The king of Shu asked with a frown. "Your Highness, the county magistrate of Chang'an is not here." The servant immediately replied. "He didn't come tonight?" The king of Shu frowned even more. Could it be that between him and Li Xian, Li Yi really chose the latter? No. The servant hurriedly explained, "The county magistrate of Chang'an was here tonight, but just now he was driven out by Steward Wu." "What?" The king of Shu slammed the table fiercely and stood up from his seat. The county magistrate of Chang'an was someone he attached great importance to. It could be said that among those present tonight, except for a few people, the mysterious county magistrate of Chang'an was the one he attached the most importance to. However, due to certain reasons, he did not reveal his importance in time. However, now he was actually driven out by the steward of the prince's mansion. The king of Shu was extremely annoyed. He was the only one who had attended his father's private banquet. Even the king of Shu himself had not received such an honor. How could such a person be driven out of his own banquet? When they saw the king of Shu walking to a corner with a gloomy face, the expressions of everyone in the hall immediately changed. To be honest, after coming out of the banquet, Li Yi did not feel embarrassed or disappointed at all. Instead, he felt a little happy. The banquet that he was willing to attend was the real banquet. It was better not to attend this so-called banquet that he obviously did not want to attend, but still had to go through the motions. After walking out of the King of Shu's mansion, Mississippi Lu followed behind him without saying a word. Li Yi had long been used to her silence, but he felt that this kind of silence was a little different today. At a certain moment, a cold voice suddenly came from behind. "Will you offend the King of Shu if you just leave like this?" Li Yi turned back to look at her and said in surprise, "If I offend him, so be it. It's not a big deal." Today Mississippi Lu was a little strange. In the past she would never ask like this. Lu Rui looked up at him and said, "You said that he is the future emperor." "Not yet, right?" Li Yi replied. Although he did not want to offend the King of Shu, it did not mean that he could not afford to offend him. The King of Shu had potential, but at least he was not the current emperor. Taking a step back, even if he really became the emperor in the future, he had nothing to lose. If he could not survive in the Jing kingdom, couldn't he go to another country? At worst, he could go to the northwest and occupy a mountain to be a bandit. "If I did not ask you that, things would not be like this, right?" Lu Rui lowered her head and her voice was no longer as cold as before. This time Li Yi was really a little shocked. Was this what Mississippi Lu should say? He took a step forward, put his palm on her forehead and asked, "You don't have a fever, do you?" Lu Rui knocked his hand off. If it was in the past, she would definitely mock him. But today she was not in the mood. He thought about it for a long time. If she had not asked that question with a sneer at the beginning, he would not have pretended to say such a joke and things would not have become like this. However, in Willow Leaf Village in Qingyan Prefecture, it had always been like this. They had always been getting along like this. Even she herself did not know why she liked to pick on him. However, in the face of his despicable answers, she often could not gain any advantage, and the possibility of being at a disadvantage was higher. Then she naturally chose to hit him. This kind of life pattern had lasted for a long time. However, when did it change? From the time they came to the capital, became the magistrate of Chong'an County, and had so many princes and princesses. Even a joke would be chased out of the banquet. She did not like it here. This was not the life she wanted. She did not like this kind of life. Qingyan Prefecture was so good and Willow Leaf Village was so good. There were no princesses or princes and there were no magistrates or magistrates. There were candied haws and rui nectar. Every day they could learn from each other in their own yard. This was what she liked. However, could she still go back? Could he still go back with her? Seeing Mississippi Lu's blank expression, Li Yi's expression changed slightly. He finally realized that something might have happened to her. This Lu Rui made him feel very strange. This was not the Lu Rui he knew. "Hey, what's wrong with you, Lu Rui? Don't scare me." Li Yi was a little nervous. He patted her face. Damn it, was there something dirty in the King of Shu's mansion? Was Mississippi Lu possessed? King of Shu. She had just said 2 words when she was interrupted by Li Yi. Nonsense, King of Shu. Even 10 kings of Shu can't compare to a hair of yours. Li Yi said impatiently. Why was she talking about the King of Shu at this time? He held her shoulder and asked, "What's wrong with you? Do you feel uncomfortable anywhere? This place is not far from the palace. I'll go to the palace to find an imperial doctor." Hearing this, Lu Rui looked up at him and her delicate body trembled slightly. Oh no, why are you trembling?" Li murmured. He looked even more anxious and hurriedly said, "Hurry up, let's go to the palace immediately. Fortunately, I didn't forget to bring the palace entry token today." Chapter 380. Li was very anxious. Mississippi Lu was really ill and seriously ill. The Mississippi Lu he knew traveled the world with a sword. She was not afraid of anything. Not to mention the King of Shu, even if the God of Heaven came she would fight first. She would not talk as much as she did today. "I'm fine." Hearing Li Yi's words, a complicated expression flashed across Lu Rui's face. She quickly recovered and shook her head. The King of Shu was a prince after all, and he was the prince most likely to inherit the throne. No one in the world would think that he was less important than a strand of their hair. However, even so, when she heard Li Yi say that without thinking, she was still very happy in her heart. He just did not show it. Really? Li Yi looked at her suspiciously and murmured, "Is it because of her period that her mood is out of order?" Then he denied this guess. After being together for so long, how could he not know when Mississippi Lu's period was? Even if she was out of order, it would not be in these few days. Moreover, her symptoms were not like this at that time. She should be looking for all kinds of reasons to fight with him. You don't have to worry about the king of Shu. I have even offended the emperor. The king of Shu is nothing. Li Yi thought to himself that he had punched the emperor's chest, asked an old eunuch to have a gay relationship with the emperor, and the perfume he made almost caused the old emperor to die in advance. Which of these things was not more serious than offending the king of Shu? But he was still standing here fine and well. Lu Rui glanced at him. Of course she did not believe his words. However, seeing that he did not seem to care, she felt inexplicably relaxed. "Don't worry." Li Yi patted her on the shoulder and said, "The king of Shu is not easy to offend, but he is not the emperor yet. He does not have the final say in the capital. Even if he really becomes the emperor in the future, we can't afford to offend him, can't we?" Li Yi looked confident and continued, "The northwest is the border of 3 kingdoms. There are at least hundreds and thousands of mountain bandits. Not even the Qi kingdom can reach there, let alone the Jing kingdom. Don't you like being a mountain bandit? We can go there and occupy a few mountains with Fong and the others. I've even thought of the name of the stronghold. Let's call it Willow Stronghold. If you are not satisfied, we can call it Black Wind Stronghold, White Goat Stronghold, or anything else. What do you think? Isn't it good?" Lu Rui stood rooted to the ground when she heard that. Moments later, her face lit up. She suddenly looked up at him and asked, "Is what you said true? Do you really think so? If what I said is false, then let me. Li Yi hesitated and said, "Let my family be rich and have 3 wives and 4 concubines, all of whom are beautiful maids." A few black lines appeared on Lu Rui's smooth forehead. Fortunately, she was used to it. She asked again, "Don't you want to be a high-ranking official?" "Who said that?" Li Yi looked at her angrily and said, "How would you know what I'm thinking? Would I tell you that my biggest dream is to be the man of the king of mountain bandits?" "The king of mountain bandits?" Lu Rui thought of the story of the young man named Luffy that he had told her. The Great Mountain Road belonged to the age of mountain bandits. Was it possible? Then, as if she thought of something, she frowned and looked at him coldly. "The king of mountain bandits? If you become the king of mountain bandits, what will I do?" It was her childhood dream to be a glorious bandit like her father and grandfather. For Mississippi Lu, it was either don't do it or do it the best. If she didn't become the king of mountain bandits, then what was the point of being a bandit? "Oh no. Li Yi shook his finger in front of her and said, "You're mistaken. I'm not the king of mountain bandits. I'm the king of mountain bandits, the man." Li Yi was still very self-aware. He knew what he was capable of. At best, he could only be a useless advisor hiding behind the scenes and giving out ideas. As for charging and breaking through enemy lines, he was not capable of doing such a thing. However, behind every successful king of mountain bandits, there must be an excellent man. He didn't want to be the king of mountain bandits, he only wanted to be the king of mountain bandits man. Of course, no matter if it was based on strength, personal charm, or the identity of the chief of Willow Village, Rui was the best candidate to be the king of mountain bandits. As for Mississippi Lu, she could at most be the 2nd king or the 3rd king. The king of mountain bandits man? Mississippi Lu was stunned. She was confused by Li Yi's words. But soon she reacted and a trace of anger appeared on her pretty face. She just said she wanted to be the king of mountain bandits, and he said he wanted to be the king of mountain bandits man. That meant he wanted to be her man. How dare he take advantage of her? Li Yi looked up at Rui and saw the sneer on her face. He immediately understood and hurriedly explained, "Don't misunderstand. I'm not talking about you. You can't beat your sister, so you can't be the king of mountain bandits. At most you can be the 2nd king. You can't be the 2nd king either. I'm the 2nd king, so why don't you be the 3rd king?" The 3rd king. Mississippi Lu felt as if her heart was stabbed with a knife. Her face became colder and her anger quickly turned into anger. Li Yi could already feel the murderous intent in the air around him. His heart skipped a beat. When he saw Mississippi Lu's hand subconsciously reaching for her waist, his eyelids twitched. She was going to use her weapon. However, this time was different from usual. He didn't hear the sound of a sword being unsheathed for a long time. Mississippi. Lu hadn't reached the realm of soundless sword. The only explanation was that her sword wasn't with her. Where's your sword? Li let out a sigh of relief and immediately asked. I think I left it in the shoe palace. Mississippi Lu's expression changed as well. When she came out of the shoe palace just now, her mind was filled with other things. She had completely forgotten about retrieving her sword. When the two of them turned around and walked back, Li scolded, look at you. What should I say about you? You're already 17 or 18 years old, but you're still so careless and forgetful. It'll be hard for you to find a husband in the future. Mississippi Lu's face was frosty. She only cared about walking and didn't say a word. Don't be so quiet. I'm doing this for your own good. Your sister usually spoils you, but this can't go on. With such a temper, how can you get married in the future? Say something. Shut up. After Mississippi Lu spoke, Li didn't say anything. After saying so much, he felt a little thirsty. If he had known this would happen, he would have gotten a bottle of grape wine from the shoe palace. At least it could moisten his throat now. Fortunately, his words didn't go to waste. Finally, he managed to persuade Mississippi Lu to return to her normal self. Lu Rui was the one with a frosty face who drew her sword at the slightest disagreement. Lu Rui was the one with the dream of becoming the king of bandits. Lu Rui was the one who chose to solve the problem with violence after being humiliated into anger. She wasn't the one who compromised and was chased out of the banquet while worrying about offending people. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.